Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a nice idea if everyone can leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. It was a Friday morning. I was home, not doing much. I had just finished cleaning up the kitchen and was about to sit down with coffee when I heard a knock. I looked through the peephole. 2 men in suits. I thought maybe they were salesmen or from some insurance place, so I opened the door just a little. One of them held up a badge and said my full name. Not a shortened version. My full name. I said, "Yeah, that's me." Then they stepped forward and told me I was under arrest. I thought it was some joke or mistake. I laughed a little. They didn't. One of them told me to turn around and put my hands behind my back. I asked what this was about. He didn't answer, just said to do it now. I didn't even have shoes on. I told them I didn't understand. My wife came from the back room, asking what was going on. My daughter too, she's only 9. She started crying right away. They handcuffed me right there in my hallway. I kept asking what this was, but they just read me my rights like they do in movies. They walked me out in front of my neighbors. One guy across the street came outside and just stood there watching. My wife followed them to the car, still asking questions. They didn't say anything to her. Just put me in the back and drove off. At the station, they brought me into this room and sat me down. Another man came in with papers and a folder. He asked if I had ever lived in Denver. I told him no. I've never even been to Colorado. Then he asked if I owned a silver Camry. I said no again. Then he laid out copies of IDs. My name, my birthday, my address, almost the same one I live in now, but just the number was a little off. There was a photo too, but it wasn't me. It looked sort of like me, I guess, in a blurry way, like from a distance you might not notice. But it wasn't me. He said I was being charged with bank fraud, insurance fraud, and another one I didn't even understand. He said I had opened up accounts in 3 different states using the same name and that I had stolen over $60,000. I sat there and said nothing for a while. I didn't even know what to say. I told them my driver's license had been stolen years ago, from my wallet, when I left it in a locker at the gym. But I canceled everything and got new cards. I didn't even think about it after. They didn't believe me right away. I could tell. I asked if I could call my wife. They let me. I told her where I was and what they were saying. She cried on the phone. My daughter was still crying in the background. I asked if she could find the police report I filed back when my wallet was stolen, just to show them something. They let me sit in that room for 2 more hours. I started to feel like maybe I was crazy. That maybe someone really made me into this. Like I wasn't who I thought I was anymore. When the officer came back, he told me they were going to release me for now while they investigated more. I didn't feel better. I felt worse. Like now I was walking around with something behind me, something I couldn't shake off. I got home, and my wife had already gone through our files. She found the police report from 2019. That was when it was stolen. We made copies of everything, and I started calling every place that had my name attached to something I didn't sign up for. I made a spreadsheet, had to learn how just to keep up. Bank accounts, credit cards, rental applications. It was everywhere. All with my name, but none of it mine. Then I found a bill sent to an address 3 towns over. I drove there. It was a house, a rental. I parked across the street and watched. About 20 minutes in, a man came out. He wore a hat, but I could still see his face. It was the man in the ID photo. The one in the folder. He walked like me. Same build. Even his beard looked like mine. I drove away and called the police. They told me not to go back, that they'd take it from there. I gave them everything I had, and they called me 4 days later. Said they caught him. Said he had been using my ID and name for almost 3 years. Every time he got close to getting caught, he'd move again. Every time he needed something new, he'd use a different address. Just enough to make it look like a mistake instead of theft. I wasn't charged anymore. Everything was dropped. But I kept getting mail in his name. My name. I kept finding accounts. Some things, I don't even know if they're still out there. My daughter still asks why the police took me. My neighbors still look at me like they don't know if I did it or not. I lost a freelance job because the background check flagged it. Even after they cleared it, the guy said he found someone else. I wake up now if I hear a car outside at night. I check the locks 3 times. I check my credit report every other day. I never used to think twice about who had my name. I didn't know someone could take it and wear it like a coat and walk around like they belonged in it more than I did. I still have that folder the officer gave me. I keep it in my desk. I look at that picture sometimes and wonder how long he had been watching me before he picked me. Or if he even had to watch at all. Maybe I just left enough behind for him to find. Maybe it was easy. Maybe I made it easy. We moved into the house in March. It was just a rental, small place out in a quiet part of town. We picked it because the price was low and the landlord didn't seem picky. It was older but clean, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, little basement with a washer and dryer. The first night there, nothing weird happened. Just boxes and unpacking and ordering pizza. But the 3rd night I remember hearing something. It was past midnight. My wife was asleep already. I was brushing my teeth and heard something under the floor. Like something thudding. I stopped and listened. Nothing else. Figured it was the pipes or maybe the washer. Went to bed. After that, the noises happened maybe every other night. Always when we were upstairs. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't the kind of house noise you ignore. Sometimes it sounded like movement. Like someone bumping into something. One time I swear it sounded like coughing. We thought it was animals. Maybe a raccoon got into a vent. I even went outside one afternoon and looked along the edge of the house. Didn't see anything weird. The basement wasn't finished. Concrete floor, 1 dim bulb with a pull chain. Furnace in one corner, laundry stuff in the other. There was a little storage room too, but the door was stuck so we never used it. I went down once with a flashlight after one of the noise nights. Didn't see anything. Smelled a little off, like mildew, but nothing worse. My wife started to say she felt like the air was different down there. Heavy. She hated doing laundry alone. Said she always rushed back up. Things got weirder about 2 weeks in. First thing I noticed was that my tools were moved. I had a plastic box with a drill and some screwdrivers. I kept it in the laundry corner on a shelf. One morning I went down to get it, and it was on the floor. Lid off. Everything scattered. I thought maybe I bumped it the last time I was down. but later I remembered I hadn't even opened it since moving in. Then my wife started noticing food missing. At first it was little things. A granola bar gone. Crackers opened. We thought maybe we just forgot eating them. But one night we made spaghetti and had leftovers. She put the container in the fridge. Next day, it was gone. Not moved. Gone. We don't have pets. No kids. Just the two of us. That was the day I got serious. I checked the doors, the windows. All locked. I even looked for signs of forced entry. Nothing. I called the landlord. He said the locks were new and nobody else had a key. He said the last tenant was a quiet guy who moved out early. Nothing weird. That night, I left my phone on video mode in the kitchen, pointed it at the fridge and set it to record while we slept. I didn't tell my wife because I didn't want to scare her. Next morning, I checked the video. Around 3:40 a.m., someone came into frame. A man. Thin. Wearing a hoodie with the hood up. He opened the fridge slow, like he'd done it before. Took out a yogurt and a bottle of water, then walked back the way he came. I paused the video and stared at the frame for a long time. The man didn't look at the camera, but I could see his face a little in the light. Pale. Beard. Maybe in his 30s. I didn't know him. I didn't recognize him at all. I showed my wife. She cried. We called the police. They came out, took a report, watched the video. They searched the house. Didn't find anything. They said maybe he was homeless and found a way in, but they didn't see signs of forced entry either. They told us to stay somewhere else if we could, and they'd send someone out again the next day. We didn't stay. I wasn't going to leave my own house like that. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited by the basement door with a bat. My wife stayed in the bedroom with it locked. At 2 a.m., I heard something from down there. It was the sound of a foot dragging. Not heavy. Just soft, like someone trying to move without being heard. I opened the basement door slow. It was pitch black down there. I couldn't see anything. I flipped the light. It came on, but nothing moved. I walked down 2 steps, then stopped. The storage room door, the one that was always stuck, was wide open. I went down, holding the bat tight. My heart was hitting so hard I thought I might pass out. I stepped across the floor, past the washer. I stood in front of the storage room and looked in. It wasn't empty. There was a mattress, flat on the floor. A blanket rolled up. A few empty bottles. Food wrappers. A flashlight. And in the corner, a backpack. I didn't see the man, but I knew he had to be close. I stepped back slow and ran up the stairs. I locked the basement door and pushed a chair under the knob. Then I called the police again. They came in minutes. This time, they found him. He was hiding behind the furnace. He had a knife. He didn't fight. Just looked down and let them cuff him. They said he'd probably been living there for over a month. Maybe longer. He'd crawled in through a vent in the back that had a broken grate. It led into the storage room. That's how he came and went. He only moved at night. He'd wait until we were asleep. They said he'd been in other homes before. Always found a place to hide. He never hurt anyone, but he always watched. Ate their food. Read their mail. Took little things. We moved out the next day. Didn't even wait for the lease to end. I didn't care. I didn't go back for the deposit. I didn't even go back for the rest of our stuff. We bought new things. I still can't sleep some nights. I wake up thinking I hear steps under the floor. My wife keeps a lock on the bedroom door even now, in our new place. I check the basement every week. Even though it's clean. Even though we have motion lights and a camera. Sometimes I think about the yogurt missing. The tools moved. The noises we brushed off. He was there the whole time. We just didn't see him. It was just after 11 when I left my friend's apartment. I stayed too long because I didn't feel like going home, but she had work early and hinted I should call it a night. I didn't drink. I hadn't even taken my jacket off the whole time. It was one of those small get-togethers where you keep checking the time, but not for any real reason. Just restless. I wasn't tired. I ordered the ride while standing outside her building. It was cold, and my hands hurt from the air. The app said the driver would be there in 6 minutes. I didn't recognize the name. It was some generic car, gray sedan, license ending in 33M. I remember that. The street was empty. She lived in a quieter neighborhood, with rows of apartments and no real bars or anything. Just dim lights, lots of trees, not many people walking around at that hour. I watched the car icon on the screen move closer, the little triangle getting near the corner. Then a gray car turned down the street. Same type as the one on the app, same dull color. It slowed in front of me. I stepped forward to look at the plate. 33M. I opened the door and got in. The guy didn't say anything right away. He just started driving. I looked down to check the route on the app, and that's when my phone buzzed. I thought it was a text. It was a call from the app. It was a recorded voice, like the ones they use to verify your pickup. It said, "Your driver is arriving in 3 minutes." I froze. I looked at the screen again. The car I was supposed to get into was still on the little map. It was turning onto a different street nearby. I looked at the dashboard. There was no phone mounted. No app running. Nothing. Just a blank screen and some old fast food bags on the floor. I asked, "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Just kept driving. Not fast, but steady. His hands were tight on the wheel. I tried the door. Locked. I said, "Let me out." Still nothing. My heart started pounding. I hit the lock button. Nothing happened. I realized he had child locks on. I yelled again, told him to stop the car. He didn't look at me, just kept staring ahead. His face was calm. Too calm. Like he'd done this before. I opened my phone and hit 911. My fingers shook so bad I almost dropped it. I whispered into the phone because I didn't want him to hear. I gave them the street signs we were passing. Told them I got into the wrong car and the driver wasn't talking and had locked the doors. The dispatcher asked for the car type. I gave it. She said help was coming. The guy must have heard something. Maybe my voice, maybe the sound of the dispatcher. He reached over fast and grabbed my wrist, tried to yank the phone out of my hand. I screamed. He didn't say a word. He just kept pulling, hard. I scratched him. I don't even remember thinking about it. Just clawed at his face and neck with my free hand. He cursed, the first sound he made, and let go. I hit him once with my elbow, then reached around and tried to pull the lock up on the door. It was one of those cars where you have to use the driver controls. He swerved the car and hit the brakes. The phone flew out of my hand and hit the dash. The screen cracked. I kicked the window with both feet. It didn't break. He reached for me again, and I leaned down and bit his arm. Hard. I tasted blood. He screamed this time, loud and angry. The car rolled to a stop. We were in some industrial area. Warehouses, chain link fences, no lights. Not a soul around. I knew I had seconds. I reached down and grabbed whatever I could find. My bag. I swung it at him over and over. He covered his face. I reached over and hit the gear shift. I don't know why I did that, but it made the car roll again. That gave me just enough time to unlock the door from his panel. I yanked the handle and pushed the door open. We were still moving a little. I jumped out and hit the pavement hard. I rolled, scraped my arm, hit my head. I got up and ran. I didn't know where. I didn't even look back. I just ran toward the only light I could see. It was a loading dock with a light over a door. I pounded on it. I screamed. I heard tires behind me. The car was turning. Then I heard sirens. Loud. Close. Red and blue lights hit the pavement around me. A cop car pulled up fast, 2 officers out with flashlights, yelling. The gray car slowed, then turned and took off. One of the cops jumped back in the car and followed. I collapsed. Couldn't even talk. The other officer got me sitting down. Asked if I was hurt. I could barely breathe. They found my phone under the seat of the car later, cracked but still working. The dispatcher had heard everything. My call stayed connected the whole time. That's how they found me. The man driving wasn't the name on any app. He didn't work for any rideshare. They said the license plate was a stolen tag. The car wasn't registered. They never found him. For weeks I couldn't sleep. Couldn't get in any car I didn't know. I still don't. I walk or take the bus. When I think about what would have happened if my phone had died, or if I hadn't called, or if I hadn't fought back, I don't think he just wanted money. He didn't say a single word the entire time. Not even when I begged him. I've never been that scared before. I don't think I ever will again. The leak started slow. It was in the ceiling, near the back hallway where the laundry machines are. I noticed it when I saw the bubble in the paint and poked it. A small stream came out, not fast, but steady. I put a pot under it and went back to work, figuring I'd fix it that weekend. I didn't. It kept dripping. I'm not good with tools, or pipes, or drywall. I work from home doing IT. My place is small, 1 story, not that old, but the plumbing's been messed up since I moved in. I asked a neighbor if they knew someone, and they told me to try this local handyman site. People post work and contractors message back. I listed it. 10 minutes later I got a message from someone named Pete. His profile picture was just a blurry headshot. Said he'd been doing home repairs for 20 years. His rate was low, and I liked that. I messaged him back and told him about the leak. He said he could come that afternoon. I asked him what tools he'd bring. He said, everything I need. I gave him the address. He got there around 3. Knocked twice. I opened the door and saw a man in a navy jacket with white stains on the sleeves, like dry plaster. Jeans, boots, tool belt. He looked tired. Maybe in his 50s. He didn't say hi, just looked at me and then passed me into the house. "Where's the leak?" he asked. His voice was low. I stepped back and pointed toward the hallway. He came in without another word. I didn't like how fast he moved. Not rushed, just like he already knew the layout. I didn't hear him close the door, but I heard the sound of the lock click behind me. I turned around. He had turned the deadbolt. "I just lock it out of habit," he said. "Don't want people walking in. No one walks in here. I live at the edge of a cul-de-sac with no foot traffic." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. He walked straight to the back hallway, looked up at the ceiling, and stood there for a minute. I stood at the edge of the kitchen, half watching. My phone was still on the counter. Something about the way he stood bothered me. He didn't touch the ceiling. Didn't get a ladder. He just stared. Then he turned and looked at me. "How long you been living alone here?" he asked. That made me stop. I hadn't told him I lived alone. I hadn't said anything about that in the listing. My profile on the app was just a first name and a zip code. No other info. "Sorry?" I asked. "Just wondering. Place is real quiet." I didn't answer. I walked into the kitchen and picked up my phone. "You mind if I check the water main?" he asked. Usually with this kind of leak it helps to shut off the pressure. "It's outside," I said. He nodded and opened the back door. He didn't go out right away. He stood in the doorframe for a moment, like he was thinking something over, then stepped out. I locked the door behind him. I went into the hallway and looked up at the ceiling. There was no leak anymore. The water had stopped. The pot underneath it was almost full, but the dripping had stopped completely. I stood there, listening. It was too quiet. I checked the time. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I peeked out the kitchen window. The gate to the backyard was closed. No sign of him. I unlocked the door, opened it, and looked around. He wasn't there. I stepped out, walked along the side of the house to the driveway. His truck was still there. A white pickup with rust on the bumper. But he wasn't in it. When I came back in and locked the door, he was standing in the hallway. I hadn't heard him come in. I froze. He just stood there, half-shadowed, looking straight at me. "Main shut," he said. "Okay. You don't got security cameras, do you?" That question hit me like a punch. I didn't answer. "Most people have those now," he said. "Always watching. I don't like them." "I don't have any," I said. "Can you fix the leak?" He smiled, but not in a friendly way. Yeah, I can fix it." He walked toward the front of the house and went to his toolbox by the door. He unzipped the top. I watched from the kitchen. I couldn't see what was inside, but he pulled something out and tucked it into his jacket. Then he turned back toward me and said, "Do you have anything to drink?" "No." "Not even water?" I said, "There's tap water." He stepped closer to the kitchen, but didn't come all the way in. He stood at the edge and looked at the sink. Then back at me. His eyes moved around the room slowly. I could feel he wasn't looking for tools. He was looking at doors, windows, escape points. "You know, it's funny," he said. "I've done work in a lot of houses. But something about this one. I gripped the counter behind me. My phone was in my back pocket. "I think I'll come back tomorrow," he said. "It's better when the homeowner isn't around." I said, "I don't want that." He tilted his head. "Why not?" "I don't feel comfortable," I said. "I think you should go." He took a step closer. "I'm not finished." "Then come back when I'm not home." "I don't like working when people aren't around." "You just said." He smiled again. I changed my mind. I pulled my phone out and held it in front of me. He watched it. Then he reached into his jacket. That was it. I didn't think anymore. I ran around the kitchen island and bolted for the hallway. I slammed the bathroom door shut and locked it. I heard his boots on the floor behind me, fast and heavy. He hit the door hard once. Then again. I didn't scream. I dialed 911 and whispered. Told them a man in my house was trying to get in. Told them he had locked the door and wouldn't leave. That he was asking personal questions. That he had something in his jacket. The dispatcher kept me calm. I stayed on the floor of the bathroom, shaking. The banging stopped after a minute. I didn't hear anything. I waited. The dispatcher told me officers were coming. To stay put. Then I heard the front door slam. 10 minutes later, the police arrived. They searched the house. He was gone. The truck was gone too. They never caught him. Said the name he gave on the handyman site wasn't real. The license plate was stolen. No prints. No ID. Nothing. He left the toolbox behind. Inside was a small saw, a pair of rubber gloves, and a screwdriver filed down to a sharp point. The pipe in the ceiling had been cut clean, like with a blade. They think he picked houses from that site. Maybe watched them first. Maybe not. I don't live there anymore. I moved out the next week. I still don't hire anyone unless I know them through someone. And even then, I keep the doors open. I don't let anyone lock anything. Sometimes I think about how calm he was. Like he wasn't in a hurry. Like he could take all the time he wanted. Like he had done it before. It was the first time we went anywhere since my wife had her second kid. We got a place by the lake, middle of nowhere. Her cousin sent us the link. The photos looked good. Big kitchen, clean bedrooms, right on the water. It had a porch with a grill. Said it was family friendly. I checked the reviews. All 5 stars. Some guy named Darren owned it, but we never met him. We did everything through the app. We got there early afternoon. The place was fine. A little dated, but nothing bad. Clean enough. The first night was quiet. We were so tired from the drive we all just ate pizza and passed out early. The baby cried a bit at 3 a.m., but that was normal. My oldest, Maddie, was sleeping in the room next to ours. The second night was when things got weird. It was raining hard, so we stayed in and watched movies. The storm knocked the lights out for a bit, but they came back after maybe 10 minutes. No big deal. After the kids went down, my wife and I were in bed talking. She was scrolling through pictures on her phone. I was trying to fix the bedside lamp. It kept flickering even after the power came back. That's when I saw it. A tiny red light blinking. At first, I thought it was part of the smoke detector. It was mounted on the ceiling, directly over the bed. But the light wasn't steady. It blinked once every few seconds. Dim, but enough to catch your eye if the room was dark. I stared at it for a bit. Something about the timing felt off. Like it wasn't a battery thing. I stood on the bed to get a closer look. My wife asked what I was doing. I told her to hold the flashlight. I pulled the chair over and climbed up all the way. The smoke detector was real, but something else was tucked behind the side. A black square, smaller than a deck of cards. It was wedged just behind the outer rim. I pulled it out. It was a camera. There was a tiny lens and a slot for a memory card. I turned it over in my hand. No markings. Just a flat black case and a little switch on the side. I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at my wife. Her face dropped when she saw what I was holding. We both sat on the bed, staring at it. She asked if I thought there were more. We checked every room, every detector, every wall outlet. The living room had a big mirror facing the couch. I took it off the wall. Nothing. The kids' room had a teddy bear sitting on top of the dresser. Not one we brought. We opened it up. Nothing inside. We flipped over every lamp, every clock. Only the one camera. I went back to our room and looked at where it had been. There was tape residue on the side of the smoke detector. Not even done well. Whoever put it there didn't care if someone found it, just wanted it to stay long enough to work. We packed a bag that second. Didn't say much to the kids. Told them we were going to a hotel with a pool. I called the number on the rental app. It went to voicemail. I left a message. I didn't yell. I just said we found something that didn't belong and we were leaving early. Told them to call me back. They didn't. The hotel was 30 minutes away. Middle of the night, pouring rain. Both kids asleep in the back. My wife sat holding the camera in her lap the whole drive. I kept checking the mirror, even though no one was behind us. When we got to the hotel, we explained enough to get a room without too many questions. We didn't sleep much. Next morning, I called the rental app support line. Told them what happened. They said they'd look into it. Asked for pictures. I sent them everything. They told me to contact the police. I did that too. A local officer met me at the station. He didn't act surprised. He said it happens more than people think. Said sometimes it's the owners, sometimes it's someone who stayed there before and came back with a key copy. They took the camera. Said they'd try to find prints or video. They'd call us. That night, I tried to pull up the listing again. It was gone. The whole rental profile was removed. No host name. No reviews. It just vanished. I checked my email. The booking confirmation was still there. But the host's number stopped working. Straight to dead tone. A week later, I got a call from the officer. He said the camera had a memory card. It had recordings. Footage from our first night, and some from before that. He said they were looking into the device's serial number, but no luck yet. He couldn't tell me much more. He just told me to be careful about future rentals. Not much else they could do unless they caught the guy. I asked if he could tell how long it had been there. He said at least a few weeks, maybe longer. He said it had been recording other people too. Other couples. One family. A girl traveling alone. We never heard another thing after that. No charges. No suspects. Nothing on the news. I bought a camera detector after that. One of those things that shines a red light and shows reflections. I bring it with us if we go anywhere. I check every vent, every outlet, every light. We don't rent places like that anymore. We stay at hotels. Chain ones with staff and cameras in the halls, not in the rooms. It still makes me sick to think about what might have been recorded. Where it could have gone. Who watched it. And for how long. I was out of work for 6 months. I applied everywhere. Retail, office, cleaning jobs, even moving companies, though I've got a bad shoulder. I was checking every site every morning and every night. I signed up for alerts, joined job boards, emailed my resume to people who never replied. Most days I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, just waiting for something to change. One night around 9, I got an email. It was short. Said they saw my profile on a job board and had an opening that fit. Didn't even say what kind of job. Just that it was urgent and they needed someone dependable. Said the pay was fair and the position could be full-time. There was a phone number and an address. No company name, no links. I should have deleted it. But I didn't. I called the number. A man picked up right away. He spoke calm, said they ran a small logistics group, that the job was general help organizing, lifting, shipping, basic stuff. He said they were between locations and working out of a temporary office. He asked if I could come in that night. Just a short meeting. Said he'd rather talk in person than send emails back and forth. He said the last guy bailed last minute and they didn't want to fall behind. I asked where the building was. He gave me the name of a road I'd never heard of, but when I looked it up it was 20 minutes from me. An old industrial area. I told him I didn't have a car. He said that was fine, they'd cover rideshare. He even offered to text me a link to a prepaid pickup. It felt strange, but at the time, I told myself this is how new businesses worked. Quick, flexible. No paperwork unless you got the job. I took the ride. The driver didn't say anything, just follow the map. The building looked abandoned. Big, 2 floors, no sign, just faded paint and a rusted metal door. The lot was empty. There were no cars. One window had cardboard over it. Another looked like it had been broken and patched with duct tape. I almost asked the driver to turn around, but I didn't. I got out and walked to the door. I thought it might be locked. It wasn't. It opened right away. Inside it was dark. Not pitch black, just that gray kind of dark, where the only light comes from street lamps outside. The hallway smelled like old wood and dust. There were no posters or furniture, just bare walls and stains on the floor. At the end of the hallway, a man stood under a ceiling light. He wore a gray jacket, jeans, and sneakers. His head was shaved. He smiled and waved when he saw me, like we were old friends. He called my name and thanked me for coming. His voice was normal. Not friendly, not cold. Just plain. He said the office was down the hall and pointed to a side room. I looked that way but didn't move. He asked if I was okay. I said yeah. He said the lights weren't great, the place was temporary. They were moving into a real office soon. Just had to finish a few things here first. I asked what the job was again. He said warehouse prep, moving boxes, checking barcodes, nothing hard. I asked how many people worked there. He said just a few. The team rotated. Sometimes only 1 or 2 were on shift. I don't know why, but I looked at his shoes. They were clean. Too clean for someone who worked in a warehouse. He said we could sit down and talk details. That it'd only take a few minutes. He said after that he could show me the floor, let me see the space. I said I was fine talking here. He paused for a second. His smile didn't move. Then he said okay, but his voice changed. Just a little. Lower. Slower. He asked if I lived alone. I didn't answer. He asked again, like he was just curious. I said I lived with roommates. He asked what time they expected me home. I asked why that mattered. He smiled wider. Said he liked to know his workers' schedules. I turned around. I didn't even say anything. Just turned to leave. He didn't move. I walked fast, but not too fast. I didn't want to run. Not until I was outside. I grabbed the door. It didn't open. I pulled harder. Nothing. I looked around for another exit, but all I saw were dark hallways. No signs. No lights. I turned back. He was still there. He had moved closer without me hearing. He said sometimes the latch sticks. That he could open it. I told him to open it now. He said he would if I calmed down. I told him I didn't want the job. He just stood there. No expression this time. I backed up, looked around again. There was a side door near the stairs. I didn't know if it was real or just a storage closet. I ran for it anyway. He didn't say anything. I heard his footsteps coming fast behind me. I threw myself into the door. It opened. I ran into a stairwell. It stank like mold and metal. The steps groaned under my weight. I didn't look back. I heard him slam into the wall behind me. He cursed, but not loud. Just like he was annoyed. I hit the first floor and ran through another hall. I saw light at the end. A back exit. I pushed it open. The cold air hit me like a wall. I ran into the lot. There were no cars, no people. I ran to the street. I didn't stop running until I reached the corner and saw headlights. It was a truck pulling into a loading bay across the street. I ran at it and waved. The driver got out and looked scared for a second. I begged him to call someone. He let me in his cab and gave me his phone. I called 911. Police showed up 10 minutes later. I told them everything. The building was still unlocked, but the man was gone. Nothing inside. No chair, no lights, no boxes, nothing. They checked the cameras in the area. There were none that worked. They told me the building had been empty for months. No records of any company renting it. No permits. No power bills. Nothing. They asked for the number that texted me the ride. I gave it to them. They said it was a prepaid burner. Same with the job email. They took my statement and said they'd file a report. Said they'd look into it, but probably nothing would come from it. They asked if I wanted a ride home. I said no. I called a friend. When I got back, I deleted every job site I'd signed up for. I threw out the clothes I wore that night. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I still don't know what he wanted. I think about it all the time. I think about what would have happened if I'd gone into that room, or waited just 1 minute longer to leave. I never found a job through those sites again. I work part-time now at a place near home. Low pay, but real people. Doors that open. Rooms with windows. It started at the gym. At least, that's when I first noticed him. I usually went in the mornings around 6:15 before work. Same routine. Warm up, cardio, weights, stretch. It's not a big gym, and I see a lot of the same people there every week. There's this woman who always reads a book on the treadmill, and an older guy who brings his own yoga mat. I keep to myself. I don't talk unless someone says something first. I don't remember when I saw him for the first time. He didn't stand out right away. Just a regular-looking man. Mid to late 30s maybe. Plain gray shirt, dark pants, short hair. No expression, no headphones, nothing in his hands. Just stared straight ahead while walking on the treadmill. I thought he was new. People come and go. It didn't matter. But then I noticed he always picked the machine next to mine. Even when others were open, he'd wait. If I moved to the bikes, he'd come over a few minutes later and get on the one next to me. When I went over to the free weights, he'd walk over and pretend to stretch near the mirror behind me. Never looked at me. Never said a word. Just always near. I thought I was being dramatic. Maybe he liked that corner. Maybe it was a coincidence. But after the third or fourth time, I started changing my routine. One day I went an hour earlier. He was already there. Another time I switched to evenings. I scanned the room. Didn't see him. I started my set, felt better. Then he walked in 20 minutes later, looked around, spotted me, and sat at the bench across from mine. Still said nothing. It started to mess with my head. I stopped going to the gym for a week. I walked outside instead. Told myself it wasn't worth the stress. Then I saw him at the coffee shop by my office. It's not a busy place. Just a small shop I go to most mornings before work. I sit by the window and read news on my phone. That day, I looked up and saw him at the counter. He didn't order. He just stood near the napkin stand, holding a cup that was clearly empty. He didn't look at me, but I knew he saw me. He walked out a minute later. I sat there, frozen. I tried to brush it off. Told myself it was a big city. People go to the same places. Next morning, I changed shops. Went to a different one 5 blocks away. He was there too. Standing near the cream station. No drink. No phone. Same clothes. Same blank face. I stopped getting coffee. Then I saw him at my bus stop. It was raining. I had my hood up. I stood under the awning, half asleep, scrolling on my phone. I felt someone come up next to me. I didn't look right away. Then I caught a glimpse of his shoes. Same dark sneakers he always wore at the gym. I turned my head. He was staring at the street. So still, like a statue. I walked away and took the next bus down, even though it didn't go near my office. I got off early and walked the rest. I was shaking when I got there. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped going anywhere I didn't need to. I switched routes to work 3 times. Changed my schedule. Started leaving later, coming back earlier. I kept telling myself I didn't know for sure, that I was making it up. Then I saw him across the street from my building. I was home early. Sun was still out. I unlocked the front door, turned turned to push it open and looked across the street by chance. He was standing under the tree. No phone, no bag, just standing there. He didn't move. I didn't go inside. I walked around the block, heart pounding. When I came back, he was gone. I went upstairs and locked the door. I sat on the floor and stared at the peephole for hours. I didn't sleep that night. I moved a chair in front of the door. I started keeping a knife in the drawer near my bed. Next morning I called in sick. I spent the whole day inside. Blinds closed. Lights off. I kept checking the windows. Every time I passed the front door, I looked through the peephole. He wasn't there. The second day, I filed a police report. They asked me his name. I said I didn't know it. They asked if he had threatened me. I said no, not directly. They told me without a name or address, and without any actual contact, there wasn't much they could do. They wrote it up and told me to call if anything happened. That night, someone knocked on my door. I didn't answer. No one said anything. Just two soft knocks, then silence. I looked through the peephole. No one was there. I waited 5 minutes. Still nothing. When I opened the door, I saw a folded paper on the floor. There was no writing. Just a picture. A photo of me from behind, sitting at the bus stop. From maybe a week ago. I was reading something on my phone. My coat was unzipped. My hair was up. The picture was sharp. Clear. Taken from close by. I dropped it and locked the door. Next morning, I packed a bag and left town. I stayed with my cousin 3 hours away. Didn't say why. Just said I needed a break. She let me crash on her couch. I stayed there for 4 days. Slept better. Ate meals. Didn't check over my shoulder. I started thinking maybe I overreacted. Then my cousin got a letter. It was in the mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Just her name, written neatly in black ink. Inside was another photo. Me again, but from her street this time. Taken at night. You could see the house number behind me. I called the police again. They said it was serious now. Told me to come in. I gave them everything. The photos. The time frames. The gym location. The coffee shops. My old bus stop. My cousin's address. They said they'd look at nearby cameras. Check any local reports. Said they'd contact the gym too. I don't know what came of it. They didn't say if they found anything. I stayed at my cousin's for another week. Then I moved. I changed apartments. New job. New email. New number. New everything. That was 9 months ago. I haven't seen him since. Not at the store. Not on the street. Not online. But I still look over my shoulder. I still lock my door the second I walk in. I still carry something sharp in my bag. I still check for shadows where they don't belong. I don't go to gyms anymore. I work out at home. I drink coffee from a machine on my counter. I take rides instead of the bus. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know what would have happened if I ever let him get closer. I don't want to know. Some people don't need to speak to be dangerous. Some of them just wait. And they wait. And they wait. When I moved into the apartment, it was just me. It was small, but close to campus. I had the bedroom, and the other room was empty. The landlord said he'd be renting it out soon, and 2 weeks later, the guy moved in. He said his name was Jared. He looked normal. Taller than me, thin, always wore a jacket even when it was hot. His voice was quiet. We didn't talk much, just the basics. He said he was studying something technical. I don't remember what. Didn't go out much. That was fine with me. I liked quiet. We split the bills. He paid on time. The first couple weeks, everything seemed okay. Then little things started happening. I had a notebook I used for one of my classes. I always left it on my desk. One day I came home and it was gone. Not moved, just gone. I checked my bag, my drawers, the kitchen, everywhere. Then the next day, it was back. Sitting right where it had been before. Nothing written in it. Nothing missing. But it was cleaner. Like someone wiped it down. I didn't say anything. A few days later, I noticed my toothpaste was almost empty. I had just bought it. I don't mean a little used, it was folded near the end. I knew Jared had his own. I saw it in the bathroom. Different brand. I went and looked. It was still full. Then I found a note. It was under my pillow. Not a sticky note or anything. Just a small piece of lined paper. The handwriting was weird, kind of shaky and uneven. It said, "He knows you see him." That was it. No name, no other writing, no drawings. Just that one sentence. I stared at it for a long time. Then I asked Jared if he had been in my room. He just looked up from his phone and said no. That was it. Not surprised, not confused. Just no. I said someone left a note, and he didn't even ask to see it. I started locking my bedroom door. A few nights later, I heard someone try the handle. I was already in bed. It was late, close to 2 a.m. I heard it click once, then stop. No knock, no footsteps. Just silence. I stayed still until morning. Next day, the lock was scratched up. Tiny marks around the keyhole. Like someone tried to open it with something else. I showed it to Jared. He said maybe it got hit with a key by accident. I told him I don't lock it from the outside. He shrugged and walked off. That night I pushed my dresser in front of the door. I started taking pictures of everything. My desk, my bed, the kitchen counter, even my shelves. Every morning before class, I took photos. Every night when I got back, I checked them. At first, nothing changed. Then my photos started going missing. Not all of them, just the ones with my room in them. I kept them on a small flash drive. One day I plugged it in, and about a dozen files were gone. I know I didn't delete them. I never even moved them. The names were still in the recycle bin, but the files were corrupted. Couldn't open them. I bought a lockbox for my stuff. Kept the flash drive inside, along with my notes and ID. I hid the key under my mattress. The next night, the lockbox was open. Nothing was missing. But the flash drive was flipped upside down, and my ID had a new scratch across the middle. Straight line, like it had been scraped. The key was back under the mattress. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have proof. I started staying at the library late. Took longer walks to class. Avoided being in the apartment. Jared was always there. Sitting on the couch, phone in hand, not talking. I checked the locks every night. I slept with my bag zipped and my shoes next to the bed. Then I found the second note. It was taped inside my closet door. I don't keep tape in there. It said, "You should stop now." That was it. No handwriting this time. Just printed letters cut from different magazines or papers. Like a ransom note. I tore it up and kept the pieces. I put them in a plastic bag and hid them in my sock drawer. Next day, I came home from class and found my closet open. The bag was gone. Everything else was there. Just not that. I confronted Jared again. I asked him if he'd been in my room. He didn't even look up this time. Just said, "You should be more careful with your stuff." That night I didn't sleep. I kept the light on. I held my phone in my hand the whole time. No noise, no knocks. Just quiet. In the morning, my window was open. It had been locked. I always checked. I never opened it. We were on the third floor. But the screen was pushed out, and there was dirt on the carpet. I told the landlord. He said Jared had lived in other units before. Said no one ever complained. Told me if I had a problem, I could leave. I started looking for new places that day. I didn't tell Jared. I packed small. Just a bag at a time. Took stuff to a friend's place. Clothes, books, the flash drive. Last thing I packed was my laptop. I left the lockbox behind. On my last night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed with the lights off. Just waited. At 3:14 a.m., my door handle turned. I heard footsteps before it. Soft ones. Then the click. Then something slid under the door. It was another note. Folded once, taped shut. I didn't touch it. I waited until the steps went back down the hall. I used a glove and put the note in a plastic bag. I never opened it. Next morning, I left before Jared woke up. Dropped the keys through the slot. My friend helped me move the rest of my stuff. 2 weeks later, I got a call from someone else who moved into that apartment. They found my name on an old package. They asked if I knew who used to live there. I asked why. They said their lock had been tampered with. And someone left a note on their bed. No envelope. Just a folded piece of paper. It said, "You let him in." It started like nothing strange. Just texting. I was 15 then. It was during a school break, so I was home most of the day. My mom worked late shifts and didn't get home until after 10, and my stepdad was not around much. I spent most of my time in my room. I wasn't allowed to have social media, but I had a second phone that I paid for with some cash I got from helping in a neighbor's store. I used it mostly to talk to people on apps. That's where I met him. His name on the app was Ty. He said he was 16. His profile had one photo. It was blurry, looked like it was taken in a car. He said he was from the next town over. We started messaging. It was normal at first. Just jokes and school stuff. He said he liked music. We liked the same shows. It felt like talking to someone my age. He was nice. After a week, we messaged every day. Every night, too. He started asking more personal stuff. Like where I lived, what my room looked like. I didn't tell him the address, just the neighborhood. He said he knew where it was. That made it feel real, like he wasn't just some fake person online. I sent a photo of my room once, nothing bad, just the posters on my desk. He didn't send many pictures back. He said his camera was cracked. He said he didn't like how he looked. Sometimes I'd ask if we could video call. He always said no. He said his mom would hear. Or his battery was low. Or he was already in bed. I didn't push it too much. After 2 weeks, he asked if I wanted to meet. I was nervous but excited. It didn't feel weird. I thought he was just like me. He said he could come by after 9, when my mom would be at work. I said yes, but I was scared to ask for him to come to the house. I told him to meet at the small park near the woods, the one with the old basketball court. It was 5 minutes from my street. That night I told my mom I was tired and went to my room early. I waited until it was dark, then climbed out the window like I had done a few times before. I had a hoodie on and my small flashlight. My phone was in my pocket. It was quiet outside. No wind. Just cold. I walked to the park. No one was there. The court had one light above it. It flickered a little. I sat on the bench and texted him that I was there. He replied fast, "Coming now." 10 minutes passed. I heard footsteps from the trail. A shape came through the trees. He wasn't 16. He was tall, broad, wearing a dark coat. Maybe mid-40s. His hair was short, face kind of rough. I stood up and said, "Are you Ty?" He said yes. I said, "You don't look like the picture." He smiled, but not in a good way. It looked fake. Like he practiced it in a mirror. He said the photo was old. Then he said he wanted to walk with me. I said I needed to go home. I didn't want to turn my back, so I kept stepping backward. He said, "Why?" "I came all this way for you." His voice didn't sound like a kid at all. I said again that I had to go, that I wasn't feeling good. He stepped closer and said, "You've been talking to me for weeks. Don't be like that." I backed away faster and pulled out my phone. I didn't call anyone, just held it up like I was. I said I was calling my brother. I don't have a brother. He looked at the phone, then smiled again. He said, "No one's coming." That was when I ran. I didn't go down the trail. I cut straight into the trees. I didn't care about branches or thorns. I just ran. My phone slipped from my pocket, but I didn't stop. I heard him behind me for a few seconds. Then nothing. I kept running until I saw the back of someone's fence. I climbed it and dropped into their yard. No lights were on, but I ran up to the back door and knocked hard. I kept knocking until a porch light came on and a man opened the door. I said someone was chasing me, and he let me inside and called the police. When they got there, I told them everything. I gave them the messages, the name, the phone number. They took my mom's info and asked me a lot of questions. They didn't find him that night. They searched the park and found my phone near the bench. But all the messages from Ty were gone. Deleted. Even his profile. A few days later, one of the officers came to our house. He said the number had been used before in another case, also someone pretending to be a teenager. They traced it to a phone store, but it was prepaid. No ID, no name. Disposable. They said I was lucky. After that, my mom took my second phone. We changed our locks. I wasn't allowed out alone for a long time. I still don't sleep with the window open. I still check behind me every time I walk home. I never saw him again. I bought the house last year. It was small. 1 floor, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. The backyard was fenced in, which I liked, and there was a crawl space under the house you could get to through a panel in the laundry room. The first couple months were normal. Quiet street, no problems. I work long shifts and live alone. I come home tired most nights, cook something fast, watch a little TV, and go to bed. I started noticing it slow. First was a fork missing. Then I found it in the living room under the side table. I figured I dropped it or carried it in without thinking. Then a spoon ended up on the bathroom sink. I thought maybe I brought it in while brushing my teeth and forgot. I forget things sometimes. I blamed myself. Then one morning, I was sure the cabinet under the sink was open. I never leave that open. It has cleaning stuff and an old bucket. I remember standing there thinking maybe I left it loose and it swung open on its own. I started closing it tight after that. A week later, my bedroom door was open when I got home. I always close it before I leave. I stood there just looking at it. Nothing looked touched, but I still checked my drawers. My laptop was where I left it. My keys and wallet were fine. I looked around the whole house. Nothing seemed taken. The windows were locked. The back door was locked. I thought maybe I was getting paranoid from work stress. I set up my phone in the kitchen one day before I left, just to record. When I got back, the footage didn't show anything weird, just hours of nothing. I laughed a little to myself, thinking I needed sleep. Then things got worse. I woke up one night because I thought I heard a voice. Just one word, like someone said hey real soft. I sat up fast and listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No noise. I live alone. I don't talk in my sleep. I stayed sitting up for a while, then went around the house with a flashlight. Still nothing. The next morning I found cereal on the floor next to the fridge. A small pile like someone dropped a bowl. I looked around for the bowl but didn't find one. I checked all my dishes. All there. No broken pieces. I cleaned it up and tried not to think about it. That day I called a friend and told him I was feeling strange in the house. He said it was probably just stress or maybe a raccoon got in. I said there was no way anything got in. The windows were sealed. The vents were small. The only place anything could hide was under the house. I went to the crawl space. I hadn't looked in it since I moved in. I unscrewed the panel and shined a flashlight inside. It was low and dusty. A smell came out like sweat and mold. I crawled in about 4 feet. There were old boards and spider webs. And trash. Food wrappers. Empty water bottles. A sock. A toothbrush. I backed out fast and closed the panel. I called the police. They came and looked inside. Found a blanket pushed in one corner. A small camp light. More wrappers. Even a notepad with writing on it. The writing was weird, just lines and circles, like someone trying to copy words but not knowing how. They said whoever it was had been living in there a while. Maybe came out at night or when I was gone. They said they couldn't find him. I asked how someone could get in. They said probably when the house was still being shown for sale or during inspections. Or maybe someone from the neighborhood snuck in early on. He had a little setup down there. They searched the place. No sign of him. I had them put a lock on the crawlspace panel from the outside. I didn't sleep much that night. I started locking my bedroom door from the inside. I carried a knife from the kitchen to bed. I thought maybe he was gone now that the police came. Maybe he knew he couldn't come back. 3 nights later, I heard breathing. Not mine. Heavy and slow. I froze. I was still in bed. I had turned the lights off 10 minutes before. I was on my side, facing the wall. The breathing was behind me. I didn't move. I tried to act asleep. It kept going, steady, quiet, but close. I could hear it through my own breathing. I didn't want to turn around. I was sure he was standing at the door. But the door was locked. I told myself it had to be in my head. Then the floor creaked. That creak only happens when someone steps near the dresser. That's inside my room. I turned over fast and grabbed the knife from under my pillow. I hit the switch on the lamp. No one was there. But the closet door was open. I hadn't opened that in 2 days. I stood, walked to it slow, and pulled it open all the way. Empty. I checked under the bed. Nothing. I opened the bedroom door, checked the rest of the house. Kitchen light was on. I never leave it on. I called the police again. They came and checked every corner. Nothing. They looked in the crawl space. Still locked. No signs of entry. They told me I could stay somewhere else if I felt unsafe. I didn't want to leave the house alone. I had them install an alarm system. 2 days after that, I was off work and stayed home all day. I kept hearing soft bumps from the wall near the laundry room. I pressed my ear to it. It was faint, like scratching or dragging. Then I heard a cough. I jumped back. I didn't call the police that time. I grabbed a hammer and went outside to the vent cover behind the house. I pried it off. The space was small, but I could see in. I saw a foot pull back into the dark. I screamed and ran to the neighbors. They called the cops. They brought dogs. They went into the crawl space again with more lights. That time they found him. He was skinny, dirty, shaking. He had a knife tucked into his pants. He said nothing. Wouldn't talk. They took him out wrapped in a sheet. His hair was long and greasy. He didn't look at anyone. The cop said it looked like he'd been living there for weeks. Maybe longer. They think he watched me through the vents. They think he came out at night, walked around, ate my food, sat on my couch. One officer said there were signs he was trying to make a small hole in the wall between the laundry room and the living room. I don't live there anymore. I sold the house 2 months later. Every creak I hear now still makes me look around. I still wake up sometimes thinking someone's breathing behind me. It happened last year. I was in grade 11. I stayed late at school to work on a group science project. Everyone else in my group had already left by 4. I told them I would stay and finish the last part because I was the only one who still had all the printouts. The teacher said I could stay as long as I wanted and just to shut off the lights when I left. He left a little after 4:30. The janitor usually came in around 6, but that day I think they switched shifts or something because I never saw anyone else. The project was due the next day and I didn't want to bring it home. It had posters and a cardboard model and the pieces were too big to carry on the bus. I was in the science wing at the back of the school. It gets quiet there after classes end. You can't hear anything from the front office or the gym. I was used to it. I liked working alone. I put on music in my earbuds and worked until about 6:20. The sun was almost down. I drank too much water from my bottle and needed the bathroom, so I left my stuff on the table and walked down the hall. The bathroom lights were already half off but still working. I used the stall, washed my hands, and went back. When I turned the corner, I saw the classroom door was shut. I hadn't closed it. I walked up and tried the handle. It didn't move. I tried again. It was locked. I thought maybe it jammed. I pulled harder. It didn't budge. I put my ear against it and listened. Nothing. My backpack was still inside. So was my phone. I walked down the hall to the office area. The front doors were locked. Every classroom I passed was empty. All the lights were off. The main hallway lights were on motion sensors, so they flickered on ahead of me, but everything behind me went dark again. I tried the teacher's lounge. Locked. I knocked on the janitor closet door. No answer. I checked the gym. No one. I went back to the science wing. I tried the door again. Still locked. I started calling out. Hello? Anyone here? Nothing. I don't know how long I stood there. 10 minutes, maybe more. I didn't know what to do. The school had an emergency phone in the front office, but the office doors were locked, too. I went back to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. I thought maybe I would just wait until the night shift came in or someone checked the cameras. I knew the school had cameras near the back entrance. Then I remembered the emergency exit by the boiler room. It was at the very end of the wing. I walked fast down the hallway, past the labs and the locked lockers. I turned the corner and stopped. A man was standing by the emergency door. He was wearing dark clothes and had something in his hand, like a wrench or maybe a crowbar. He wasn't facing me. He was just standing still. I didn't move. I stepped back slowly, not making any sound. I turned and walked the other way as fast as I could without running. My heart was pounding in my chest. I ducked into the supply closet behind the science lab. It was small and smelled like old chemicals. I pulled the door almost shut but left a crack so I could look out. I waited. A few minutes later, I saw him walk past the glass door of the lab. He wasn't carrying anything now. He moved slow. He stopped by the locked classroom and looked at the handle. Then he kept going. I couldn't hear his footsteps. I stayed in the closet. My legs started hurting from crouching. I heard a noise from down the hall. Something metallic. Then the hallway lights clicked off. I held my breath. My ears were ringing from how quiet it was. I waited until I couldn't hear anything. Then I opened the closet door and stepped out. I walked back to the classroom. Still locked. I went down the other hallway, toward the tech rooms. I tried every door. All locked. Then I heard the back stairwell door open. It made a loud echo. I ran into the girls' bathroom and climbed onto the toilet in the last stall. I pulled my hoodie up and held my breath. The door opened. I heard shoes on the tile. Slow steps. They stopped outside the stall. I didn't move. Then I saw the shadow under the door. It stayed there for a long time. Then the door opened a crack. I saw fingers on the edge. The person didn't say anything. I kicked the door as hard as I could. It slammed into him and I heard a grunt. I jumped off the toilet and ran. I didn't look back. I went to the second floor library. It's at the front of the school. I found a table near the window and threw a chair at it. The glass cracked but didn't break. I grabbed another chair and hit it again. This time it shattered. I climbed out and jumped onto the overhang. Then I lowered myself down onto the grass. My hands got scraped, but I didn't care. I ran to the house across the street. I banged on their door until someone opened it. It was an old woman. I said someone was in the school, and she called the police. They came in 10 minutes. I showed them where the man was. They didn't find anyone, but the back emergency door had scratches on the frame, like someone had tried to pry it open. There was a small camera in the hallway, and they said they would check the footage. A week later, one of the officers called my mom and said the man's face was not clear in the video. He wore a hood and looked down most of the time. They said no staff were scheduled after 5. No one knew how he got in. I never found out who he was. They never said if they caught him. I changed schools. I don't stay late anywhere now. It started at 2:17 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I checked the clock when I sat up. I thought it was a dream at first, but the sound didn't stop. It was banging. Someone was hitting my front door. Not knocking. Full-on banging with fists. The kind where it shakes the frame and sounds like it might break. I live alone. Small house outside the city. Quiet street. Neighbors not too far, but not close enough to hear every little thing. I work early shifts, so I was asleep since around 10. No music, no TV. I keep it quiet. I got up, heart going already. Walked down the hall without turning on any lights. The blinds were closed. I looked through the peephole. There was a man outside. Tall. Shaved head. Wearing a hoodie with something written on it. He looked like he was in his 30s or 40s. His face was red. He was shouting. I couldn't hear what he was saying at first because the door was thick. But then he leaned in and yelled louder. "Open the door. I know she's in there. Don't make me break this down." I stood there frozen. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I thought maybe he was at the wrong house. Then he kicked the bottom of the door. The whole thing shook. I backed away and grabbed my phone from the counter. I called 911 and whispered what was happening. The dispatcher asked if I could see a weapon. I said no, not yet. But I told her the man was trying to get in. She told me to stay on the line and not to open the door under any circumstances. While I was still on the phone, the man started yelling again. "Krista, I know you're in there. Come out here now or I'll drag you out myself." I don't know anyone named Krista. I told the dispatcher that. I said I lived alone, and I didn't know who he thought was inside. She told me officers were on the way. He kept yelling. He kicked the door again. Then I heard a sound I knew instantly, a metal click. He pulled out a gun. He held it sideways and pointed it at the doorknob. I backed further into the kitchen. The dispatcher heard it too and told me to get somewhere safe, lock a room if I could. I ran into the hallway bathroom and locked the door. From there I could still hear him. He shouted more, calling out for Krista and saying he wasn't playing games. Then he fired. One shot. The sound was deafening. It echoed in the whole house. The bathroom wall shook. I thought he shot the lock off. I thought he was coming in. But a few seconds passed, and I didn't hear the door open. Just more shouting. He kept pacing on the porch, yelling and kicking the door again. He didn't try another shot. I stayed crouched by the tub. The dispatcher asked me if I was okay, if I was hurt. I told her no. She said police were less than 2 minutes out. Then he screamed something I'll never forget. If I find out you're hiding her, you're dead. You hear me? You're dead. I didn't say anything. I just pressed the phone harder against my ear. I could hear him breathing hard outside the door. He wasn't even knocking anymore. Just standing there, muttering to himself, pacing in a tight circle. Then I heard the sirens. He heard them too. I could tell because his footsteps moved fast. I heard him run across the porch. Then I heard tires squeal. I came out of the bathroom only when the dispatcher told me the officers were outside. I opened the door slowly and saw 2 cops with flashlights drawn. They had me sit down. One went to search the yard, the other asked me questions. I was still shaking. I couldn't remember what the man was wearing besides the hoodie. I gave them what I could. They found the shell casing on the porch. He had aimed at the lock but missed. The bullet went through the door frame and into the coat closet wall. They searched the area but didn't find him. No car description. I don't have a door cam. I've got one now, but I didn't then. They stayed until morning. They offered to call someone for me, but I didn't have anyone close. I just stayed on the couch with the lights on. A few days later, a detective called. Said a woman named Krista filed a report 2 towns over about her ex-boyfriend. Said he'd been following her, thought she was seeing someone new. She'd blocked him. She never gave him her address. But he must have found something old or guessed or got it from someone, and had led him to my house by mistake. They eventually caught him. 2 weeks later, found him living out of his car in a grocery store parking lot. He had the gun still. Said he thought Krista was hiding from him. Wouldn't say where he got the idea she was in my house. They charged him. I don't know what happened after that. The detective said I wouldn't be needed in court since he didn't actually break in or hurt anyone. I got the door replaced. Put cameras up. I still check them twice every night. I still wake up at 2:17 sometimes, thinking I hear banging. It happened last summer, during that massive blackout we had. The whole city went dark, no power anywhere. I remember I had just gotten home from work, around 7:30, and the lights were already flickering as I walked in. I didn't think much of it at first, just another random power surge, nothing to worry about. But the lights kept going out, and then the whole block just went dark. No street lights, no traffic lights, nothing. I live in a small apartment on the 2nd floor of a building in the middle of the city. It's not in the best part of town, but it's been fine for the last 2 years. The building's old, the neighbors are quiet, and I've never had any issues. I've always felt safe here, too safe, probably. I had a feeling that night that something wasn't quite right, but I didn't think too much about it. It was just a blackout. People were probably out in the streets, trying to get food or water, or whatever. I figured I'd just ride it out like everyone else. I sat down on my couch and tried to listen to music on my phone, but the battery was low. My flashlight was in the kitchen drawer, so I grabbed that. There's something about being alone in the dark that's unsettling, even if it's just a blackout. I wasn't scared, exactly, but my mind kept going over all the what-if scenarios. What if something was wrong? What if I wasn't alone in here? I checked my phone. Nothing. No texts. No calls. Just darkness. Then I heard it. The sound of the door opening. It wasn't loud, like someone was kicking it in, but it was still clear enough to make my stomach drop. At first, I thought it was just the wind. The door to the building is old, and the frame's been a little loose since I moved in. It's easy for it to creak and move if there's a draft, so I told myself that was all it was. But then I heard footsteps. I froze. The first thought that crossed my mind was that maybe someone was messing around outside. A neighbor, maybe. But then, there was no knock, no voice, nothing to say who it was. Just the sound of someone moving around in the hall. The hallway is narrow, the kind where if someone's standing near your door, you can hear them breathe. I couldn't see anything outside, but I could hear the soft shuffle of footsteps on the floor, like someone was walking slowly, deliberately. I got up and crept toward the door, trying to keep as quiet as possible. I didn't want to make any noise in case they heard me. The last thing I wanted was to confront someone who wasn't supposed to be here. I grabbed the edge of the door and nudged it open a little. I just wanted to see who was out there, if anyone was out there. The hallway was dark, but I could make out a shadow by my door. Someone was standing there. My heart stopped. I didn't know who it was. I didn't recognize the shape. I couldn't make out any details, just the vague outline of a person. They weren't moving, just standing there, completely still. The kind of stillness that didn't feel natural. Like they were waiting for something. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, and I couldn't get my body to move. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't want to take my eyes off the door. What if they heard me? What if they knew I was watching? I waited a few seconds, then stepped back. Quietly. I grabbed my phone again, but it had no service. The whole city was down, no connection to the outside world. That was when I realized just how isolated I really was. No power. No way to call for help. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure if they could hear me or if they knew I was inside. My mind kept racing through every possible scenario. Maybe it was a neighbor who didn't know the door was ajar, but that didn't explain the silence. Why weren't they saying anything? Why weren't they moving? I kept the door cracked open just a little. I wanted to know what was going on, but I didn't want to give myself away. The silence stretched out longer than I could stand. The person in the hall didn't move. It was like they were waiting for something, waiting for me. I thought about bolting the door, but I couldn't. If they wanted to get in, they would. That thought paralyzed me. I couldn't just hide in the apartment forever. And there was no way I was leaving without knowing who this person was. I took a deep breath and opened the door a little wider. Just enough to see more of the hallway. I still couldn't make out much. The shadow was still there, standing. The only sound was the distant hum of the city. No other movement, no cars, no voices. Just me and this person in the dark. I called out, my voice sounding louder than it should have. Hello? My voice cracked, but I kept going. Who's there? No answer. I moved my hand slowly toward the door, ready to slam it shut if I needed to, but before I could, the person stepped forward. Just one step. That was all. And it was enough. I could see the outline of their face, but only for a second before they ducked back into the dark again. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't seen them clearly. but I'd seen enough. There was something in the way they moved, something that didn't feel right. My gut told me that whoever it was, they didn't belong here. I felt a rush of panic. I couldn't stay there, not with this person outside. But what if they followed me? What if they were waiting for me to make the wrong move? My breath was shallow, and I started shaking. I pulled back into the apartment, closing the door just enough that it clicked shut, and locked it quickly. I turned off the flashlight on my phone. I didn't want to risk drawing attention. I could still hear the person breathing, now a little louder. They were still out there. I sat on the floor in my living room, trying to stay as quiet as possible. My mind was racing again, going over every possible exit strategy. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, but I knew I couldn't. Then, like a sick joke, the power came back on. The lights flickered overhead. I stood up in a panic, heart pounding, and rushed to the window. I pulled the blinds just a little, not enough to be obvious, but enough to see. No one was in the hall anymore. The shadow was gone. The door was still ajar, but it was empty. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the living room with the lights on, phone in hand, watching the door. The next day, I left as soon as I could, called a locksmith, and had the locks changed. I haven't seen or heard from anyone since then, but I can't shake the feeling that someone was waiting. Someone knew I was alone. It was the beginning of fall, and I decided to take my bike out for a ride on one of the more remote trails near the edge of town. I'd ridden this trail before, but it had been a while, and with the weather cooling down, I figured it would be a good chance to get out and enjoy some quiet. The trail is in the woods, far enough from civilization that I wouldn't be disturbed, which is exactly why I liked it. No one ever really went out there. The trees were thick, and it was a good spot for clearing your head, or so I thought. I started my ride late in the afternoon. The air was crisp, and the sky had that mix of orange and pink from the setting sun. It was peaceful at first, just the sound of my bike wheels on the dirt and the occasional bird call. The deeper I went into the woods, the more the noise from the outside world faded. The only things left were the rustling of leaves and the crunch of my tires against the trail. I wasn't worried. I've ridden through there plenty of times. I knew where I was going, and there were no real concerns. The path isn't really a bike lane, more like an old, forgotten trail that people sometimes use for hiking. You don't expect to see much of anyone. That's how I liked it. No distractions. No crowds. Just me and the road. But that afternoon, something felt different. About halfway through the ride, I started to get this feeling. It's hard to describe, but it was like I was being watched. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just me overthinking things, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It was like the woods themselves had grown too quiet, too still. I tried to focus on the path ahead, but every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision, something behind the trees. Just a shadow, or maybe a rustling leaf. It kept happening every few seconds, a flicker of motion. I stopped and looked around. There was nothing there. The woods looked the same as always, peaceful, serene. But that feeling still wouldn't leave me. I couldn't shake the thought that someone was out there, just watching me. I pushed it out of my mind and kept riding, trying to stay focused. But then I saw something that made my heart jump. Up ahead, I noticed a car. It was parked off to the side of the trail, nestled between a thick group of trees. I hadn't seen a car here before, and that caught my attention. The trail didn't really go anywhere near a road, so it was odd that someone would park it here. The car was old, rusty, dark, nothing special, but definitely out of place. It didn't look like a car that was just parked there by accident. Whoever owned it had parked it deliberately, out of sight. And that made me uneasy. I slowed down as I passed, my eyes instinctively moving from the car to the trees around it. That's when I saw them. Two men were standing behind the trees, just out of sight at first. But I caught the flash of movement. One of them stepped out from behind a tree, and then the other. They were standing there, watching me. I'm not a paranoid person. I don't jump to conclusions. But something in my gut told me that this wasn't normal. It wasn't right. Their posture was too still, their gazes too focused. They weren't just standing there like people passing through, they were standing there like they were waiting for something. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to keep writing, to keep moving, to act like I hadn't seen them. But the air had changed. It felt heavier, and my pulse was pounding in my ears. I tried to look away, tried to pretend I hadn't seen them, but I couldn't help it. I had to know who they were, why they were out here. I kept writing, slowly this time, never taking my eyes off the men. They didn't move. They just kept watching me. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what was going on. Maybe they were hikers, just out for a walk. But then again, why were they standing so close to the trail, behind the trees, not saying anything? My thoughts were all over the place. I thought about stopping, turning around, maybe going back the way I came. But I didn't. For some reason, I kept writing forward, even though I knew deep down it wasn't a good idea. I wanted to get past them, to get far enough away that I didn't have to think about them anymore. But as I rode, I felt the distance between us getting smaller, the quiet tension building in my chest. I kept my eyes on the trail, trying not to look at them, trying to ignore the feeling that they were following me with their eyes. But as I got closer to the car, I noticed something else. The area around the car seemed too clean, too untouched, like it hadn't been disturbed for a long time. No tire tracks in the dirt leading up to it, nothing. Just a car sitting there like it had been placed in that exact spot for a reason. And then, just as I was about to pass, one of the men stepped forward. He didn't come right up to the trail, he just stepped far enough forward to get closer to my line of sight. And he said something. "Hey, you need help?" His voice was calm, too calm, like he was trying to sound friendly, but something about it felt off. His tone was just a little too slow, too deliberate. My heart skipped. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just kept pedaling, faster now, my mind racing. I had to get away. I had to get out of there. But the moment I tried to speed up, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy steps, like someone was following me, keeping pace. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to know. My eyes stayed fixed ahead, but my mind was screaming at me to go faster, to get away, to get out of there. The sound of the footsteps grew closer, and that's when I made the decision. I turned sharply, veering off the main trail and into a smaller, less defined path I'd ridden before. It wasn't much of a trail, more like a deer path, but it led away from the main trail and into the woods. I knew it was a risk, but I didn't care. I couldn't stay there. I could hear them now, their footsteps in the distance, but they weren't close enough. I kept riding, my heart pounding in my chest, pushing myself harder. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Eventually, the sound of their footsteps faded. I kept going, not allowing myself to slow down until I reached the main road. Only when I finally hit pavement did I slow down, my legs shaking from the effort. I looked back once, but there was nothing. I never saw the car or the men again. But I haven't gone back to that trail. And I don't think I ever will. My partner and I had been looking for a new house for a while. We weren't in a rush, but we were both excited to find something we liked. We had been to a few showings already, but nothing felt right. One Sunday afternoon, we scheduled a tour for a house that seemed promising from the pictures. It was in a quiet neighborhood, a little outside of town, which was exactly what we were looking for. The house looked big enough, and it had that old charm that we both liked. We agreed to meet the real estate agent at noon. When we got to the house, the first thing we noticed was how quiet it was. The street was empty, and the yard had a few trees, the kind that would look great in the fall. The house itself was older, but well maintained. It had a big porch with a swing on it. It looked cozy, and that made us both hopeful. The real estate agent, a middle-aged woman named Linda, was already waiting for us when we pulled up. She greeted us with a smile and a handshake, and after a few minutes of small talk, we went inside. The place had a strange, musty smell that I couldn't quite place, but it wasn't unbearable. It was just there. Linda gave us a quick overview, pointing out the main features of the house. Then she told us she had another appointment soon and would give us time to look around on our own. "I'll leave you two to explore. I'll be in the car if you need me," she said, heading for the door. We nodded, thanked her, and watched as she walked out, leaving us alone in the house. It felt good to finally be on our own. We wanted to see the house without any distractions, so we started by walking through the living room. It had high ceilings and big windows, and I could picture us sitting there with a cup of coffee on a lazy morning. We went through the kitchen, which had that classic farmhouse look. But as we explored more, the feeling in the house began to shift. The farther we went, the more something started to feel off. It wasn't anything specific, just an unease that seemed to settle over me the longer I was there. I couldn't explain it, but it was like the house had too much quiet. Like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. We decided to go upstairs. The staircase creaked with every step, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of the old wood beneath my feet. The hallway upstairs was narrow and lined with doors. There were 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, and what looked like a small study. The air in the hallway felt cooler than the rest of the house, almost as if the heat didn't quite reach that part of the house. We started to peek into the rooms, moving from one to the next. The 3rd bedroom had a big closet in it. When we opened the door to check, I froze. I could have sworn I heard something. It was quiet at first, but then I heard it again, movement, a small shuffle of feet. It sounded like it was coming from inside the closet. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at the closet door, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was the house settling, or the wind outside. My partner seemed to sense something too, because I could see the tension on their face. They took a step toward the door, and I hesitated for a second before following. We opened the closet. There was a man inside. He was crouched down in the corner, his face hidden behind a pile of coats, but I could see his eyes, wide, frantic, almost wild. For a second, neither of us moved. I thought my heart was going to stop. The man didn't say anything. He just stared at us like we were the ones who had walked into his space. It wasn't just the shock of finding someone in a closet that made everything feel so wrong. It was the way he was sitting, the way he was hiding, as if he knew we were coming. Like he had been waiting there for hours, maybe days. The moment stretched out, and I felt like the air in the room was suffocating me. Then, the man spoke, but it wasn't what I expected. "Get out," he said, his voice rough and hoarse. The sound of his voice sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know if he was angry or scared, but the command was clear. It was almost as if he was warning us, but I couldn't tell if he was going to hurt us or if he just wanted to be left alone. Either way, we were both frozen in place. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My partner looked at me, and I could see the panic in their eyes, too. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't want to take my eyes off the man. The whole situation felt so unreal, like we had stepped into someone else's nightmare. "Please," my partner whispered, "we need to get out of here." The man didn't respond, but his eyes never left us. There was something wild in them, something I couldn't place. I didn't want to provoke him, but I knew we couldn't just stand there, not knowing what he might do. I took a deep breath and backed away slowly, inching toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. My partner followed, keeping their eyes on the man as we moved. We didn't take our eyes off him until we were out of the room, and even then, I felt like he was still watching us. I closed the door behind us, but the feeling didn't go away. The house was silent again, too silent. I had no idea how long the man had been hiding there, or what he had been planning, but I knew we couldn't stay. We didn't go back to the living room. We didn't even think about going down the stairs. We turned and ran straight for the front door, not even bothering to look for Linda. I didn't know if the man was still in the house, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. We reached the door, and I yanked it open. I could hear my partner's heavy breathing behind me, and I knew we had to get away from the house, far away. We ran down the driveway and into the street. The moment we were outside, I looked back. The house was still there, quiet, but now it felt like a trap. I don't know if the man came out after us. I didn't wait to find out. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. I called the police, but by the time they got there, the house was empty. The man was gone, and there was no sign of anyone hiding in the closet. The police searched the house, but they didn't find anything out of the ordinary. I don't know if they thought we were making it up, or if they just didn't want to deal with something that didn't have an easy explanation. But I know what I saw, and I will never forget the look in his eyes. It started out like any other day. I had been working from home, sitting at my desk in the spare room, the one with the big window that looks out onto the street. The sun had just begun to dip behind the trees outside, casting long shadows across the yard. It was the kind of evening that felt peaceful, almost comforting. I just finished a meeting, and I was starting to relax when I heard the sound of the mailbox lid clinking shut outside. It wasn't unusual, since I get deliveries often, so I didn't think much of it at first. But when I went outside to check the mail, I noticed something odd. There was a plain brown package sitting on the porch, no label, no return address. It wasn't the kind of package I usually get. It was small, about the size of a book, and it was wrapped in cheap brown paper. No markings, just a faint crease from where the paper had been folded. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was something from an online order, or a mistake from the post office. But as I picked it up, I felt this strange sensation crawl up my spine. It wasn't right. I stood there for a moment, staring at the package. I don't know why, but I felt nervous. Like something was off. Maybe it was the fact that I didn't remember ordering anything, or the fact that it had no return address. I shook it, but it didn't make any noise. No clinking or rattling. Just the dull thud of paper against my palm. I almost went back inside without opening it. But curiosity got the better of me. I brought it into the house, setting it on the kitchen table, and grabbed a knife to cut the paper. As I sliced through the tape and pulled the paper back, I didn't know what to expect. But it definitely wasn't what I found. Inside the package was a stack of photos. About 20 or so, all of them taken from different angles, from what looked like across the street. Each photo was of me, standing in different parts of my house. In some of them, I was sitting at my desk, typing on my laptop. In others, I was in the kitchen, washing dishes or making coffee. There were even a few where I was standing by the window, staring out at the street. I felt my breath catch in my throat. These weren't pictures I had taken. These were pictures of me, from outside my own house, and I had no idea who had taken them. I flipped through the photos, each one more unsettling than the last. The angles were strange. Some of them were taken from behind the trees in my front yard, others from the neighbor's driveway. There was even one of me on the porch, taken through the slats of the fence. It was clear that whoever had taken these pictures had been watching me for a while. Maybe even longer than I realized. I felt my skin prickle with fear. How had they gotten so close without me noticing? And why had they sent these to me? My mind was racing, my thoughts running wild. It didn't make sense. There were no notes, no explanations. Just these photos. I tried to shake it off, but the more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. I picked up the photos again, holding them up to the light, trying to find any clue that would make sense of it all. I thought maybe I could find a hint, something that would tell me where they had been taken, or who had taken them. But nothing. The only thing I could see in every picture was me. And the fear slowly started to turn into anger. I started looking around my house, checking all the windows. Every one was locked. Every curtain was drawn. I kept glancing at the front yard, hoping I'd see someone standing out there, but the street was empty. No one was around. Just the quiet evening air and the rustling of the trees. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me. And maybe they still were. I went back to the photos and stared at the one taken through the fence. It looked like it had been snapped just after I had stepped out onto the porch. My heart began to race. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something chilling. Whoever had taken these photos had been waiting for the perfect moment. They had known when I would be outside. They had known when I would be looking out the window. I wanted to call the police. I really did. But I didn't know what to say. How could I explain this? A package with photos of myself, but no sender, no return address. It didn't seem like enough for them to take seriously. What if they thought I was overreacting? Still, I couldn't ignore the fear creeping into my chest. The fact that someone had been watching me, that they had been in my space without my knowledge, it felt like a violation. It was like someone had seen me in my most vulnerable moments, and I didn't know how to stop it. I decided to take action. I locked the doors and windows, checked all of them again, then double-checked. I even moved the furniture in front of the windows, just to be sure. I called my friend Katie, told her everything, and asked her to come over. She agreed right away, but she sounded worried. I think she could tell I was scared. While I waited for Katie to arrive, I sat on the couch with the photos, staring at them. The longer I looked at the pictures, the more it started to feel like they were mocking me. Like the person who took them was just watching me, waiting for me to figure it out. And the thought that someone knew my routine, knew my life, it made my stomach turn. Katie arrived an hour later. She looked just as freaked out as I felt. We sat down on the couch, and I showed her the photos. Her eyes widened as she flipped through them, her hand shaking slightly. "This is messed up," she said quietly. "Do you have any idea who could have done this?" I shook my head. I had no idea. It didn't make sense. None of it did. We talked about it for a while, and Katie suggested I file a police report. But I still wasn't sure. What could they do with so little information? The photos weren't enough to track down anyone. They didn't prove anything, except that someone had been watching me. I didn't sleep much that night. Every little sound made me jump. Every time a car drove by, I found myself peering through the curtains, hoping I wouldn't see anyone standing outside. It was like I was waiting for someone to show up, like I was being hunted and didn't know when the hunt would end. The next day, I went to the post office and asked if they could trace the package. The worker there was kind but couldn't offer much help. The envelope had been sent with no return address, and the postage had been paid with cash. There was no way to track it. No way to know where it had come from or who had sent it. A few days passed, and the paranoia started to settle in. I tried to convince myself that maybe it had been a prank, some sick joke by a random stranger. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Whoever had sent those photos knew too much. They were watching me. I still don't know who sent the package or why. I don't know if they're still watching. But every time I look out the window now, I'm waiting to see if someone is standing there, waiting for me. It was supposed to be a simple weekend away. Something to help with team bonding, the kind of thing every company does to boost morale. I'm an office worker, so I didn't expect anything fancy. Just some corporate retreat at a random cabin in the woods. I didn't even want to go. I'd rather have spent the weekend at home, but it was mandatory. You know how it is when the boss says you have to do something. So, I packed a bag, drove out there, and showed up just like everyone else. The retreat center was about an hour outside the city, deep in the woods. The kind of place where your cell phone doesn't work, and all you can hear are the sounds of nature. I wasn't too thrilled, but it didn't seem that bad at first. The building itself was old, maybe from the 60s or 70s, with brick walls and a large wooden front door. When I arrived, I noticed there was already a few other employees there. Some of the department heads, a couple of people from HR, and a few others I didn't know too well. We were all gathered in the main lobby when the organizer, someone from upper management whose name I didn't really know, gave us a brief welcome speech. He didn't seem too excited about the whole thing either. Everyone looked tired and just wanted to get the thing over with. It didn't feel like the fun, team-building kind of thing we were promised. It just felt strange. After the speech, we were told to head to our rooms. The place was like a giant dormitory, each room with 2 beds, wooden floors, and a small desk. The rooms weren't bad, but they were basic. I dropped my stuff off, checked to make sure my phone had no signal, it didn't, and then wandered around to see what everyone else was doing. That's when things started to get weird. I had just passed the lounge area where some people were playing cards and chatting when I noticed that the doors to the building were locked. Not just the main doors, but every exit. I tried a couple of them, just to be sure, but each one was firmly shut, the handles cold in my hand. I figured it was some weird retreat rule. Maybe they just wanted us to stay inside for team bonding, but it still made me uncomfortable. I went back to the lounge and sat down with a few other employees. We all exchanged awkward small talk about the retreat, and then someone asked the organizer, "So, when can we leave tomorrow?" The guy paused for a moment. His eyes darted around the room like he was trying to read the mood. "Well, you know, this is a weekend retreat," he said. "We don't leave until Sunday morning. And, actually, we have something you'll need to sign before you go. It's just a formality, really." A formality? We all looked at each other, exchanging confused glances. I didn't want to ask too many questions, but the whole thing felt off. Later that night, after we'd all had dinner together, the lights went dim, and the atmosphere became even more uncomfortable. The organizer handed out the forms. They were single sheets of paper, nothing too fancy, but the words on the page looked strange. I glanced at the document, but it didn't take long to realize that the text was a series of vague clauses I didn't quite understand. Something about confidentiality. Something about participating in certain activities. The thing that caught my attention most was the line at the bottom that said, "By signing, you agree to follow all instructions given during the course of this retreat." Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. It felt like he was almost daring us to ask what the instructions would be. But we didn't, of course. The atmosphere was tense now, and no one wanted to seem like they were questioning the rules. Still, I had a bad feeling about it. I've never been the type to go along with things just because everyone else does. But everyone else was signing it. One by one, I watched people sign the paper, nervously glancing at each other but not saying anything. No one seemed to want to rock the boat. They just wanted to get through this retreat and go back home. I didn't want to be the only one not signing, so I reluctantly signed my name at the bottom. I didn't even read all of it. I was just ready to get it over with. After everyone had signed, we were told to go back to our rooms and relax for the evening. But when I tried to leave the lounge, the organizer stopped me at the door. "You're not allowed to leave the building until tomorrow morning," he said flatly. "The doors will remain locked. Please stay inside." I was caught off guard by the directness of it, but I nodded. I wasn't in the mood to argue. I went back to my room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The whole place felt off, like I was trapped in some strange, corporate prison. I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of people talking in the hallway. The sound of voices faded, and eventually, I heard a loud bang. It was coming from one of the rooms, followed by shuffling footsteps. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just someone moving around, maybe someone trying to leave. But I heard it again, another bang. Then more footsteps. And then, someone knocked on my door. I froze, too scared to even breathe. I didn't answer. The knock came again, louder this time. Whoever it was, they didn't give up. They knocked and knocked until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I got up and peered through the peephole. No one was there. That's when I heard it. The distinct sound of something sliding under the door. I crouched down to look. It was a piece of paper. The same strange forms from earlier. But this one had something written on it, in thick black ink, "Don't trust them." I was too scared to move. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I didn't want to stay there anymore. I couldn't figure out what the hell was happening, but I needed to get out. I waited until the hallway was quiet, then I grabbed my stuff and made my way to the nearest exit. The door was locked, just like before. I tried the windows, but they were all locked too. Everything was locked down tight, and it was as if they knew I would try to leave. My heart raced as I realized I was trapped. It felt like there was no way out. But then, just as I was about to lose hope, I noticed something strange, a small, hidden door in the back corner of the building, almost unnoticed by the rest of the group. It was a service door, a door I hadn't seen before. I didn't think twice. I ran to it, grabbed the handle, and pulled. It was unlocked. I opened it just wide enough to slip through, and I was outside. I didn't look back. I ran through the woods, not caring about anything except getting as far away from the place as I could. I don't know if anyone ever found out what was going on there. I don't even know if the retreat center still exists. But I know one thing, I will never, ever go to one of those things again. And I will never forget the feeling of being trapped with nowhere to go. It was supposed to be a regular babysitting job. I'd done it 100 times before. The family was nice, and the kids were easy to watch. I usually just watched TV, played games, and made sure the kids were in bed before their parents came home. This particular night started out just like any other. but it ended up being the most terrifying night of my life. The family lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Their house was a nice two-story place on a tree-lined street. I remember it being around 9:30 or so when the parents left for their evening out. The kids were already fed, bathed, and ready for bed. The parents told me they'd be back by midnight, which was fine. It meant I had a few hours to relax before they came home. The kids went to bed without a problem. I made myself comfortable on the couch, flicked on the TV, and zoned out. It wasn't even an hour later when I heard the knock at the door. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor or maybe someone trying to sell something, but it didn't feel right. I got up from the couch and walked toward the door. I peeked through the little peephole in the door and saw a man standing there. He was probably in his mid-30s, wearing a dark jacket, and had a serious expression on his face. I didn't recognize him, which was strange. I was sure the parents hadn't mentioned anyone coming by. But then again, they had said something about a neighbor picking up some mail for them, so maybe it was him. I opened the door a crack, just enough to see him better, and asked, "Can I help you?" The man smiled faintly and said, "Hi, I'm a friend of the parents. They asked me to come by and check on things." I paused for a moment. I wasn't sure about this. I had been told not to let anyone into the house unless they were on the approved list, and I didn't recognize this guy. I asked, "I'm sorry, but what's your name?" He hesitated for a split second before replying, "I'm Mike. I'm just a friend of the family. They told me to stop by and make sure everything was good here tonight." I could feel the unease starting to creep in. I'd been told they had no plans for anyone else to come by, and something about this felt off. "Well," I said slowly, "I don't think they mentioned you coming over tonight." "Oh, I'm sure they did," he said, his voice almost too calm. "It's just to make sure everything's going fine. You know, checking in on you, making sure the kids are okay. It's really no trouble." I felt a strange chill run through me. I didn't like the way he was standing there, or the way he didn't seem in any rush to leave. I was still unsure, but I didn't want to seem rude, so I said, "Just a second." I shut the door, and my heart started racing. I went straight for the phone, dialing the parents' number. My hands were shaking. They told me if there was ever any confusion about a visitor to call them right away. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity, but finally, the dad answered. "Hello?" "Hi, it's me, the babysitter," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a guy here, says he's a friend of yours, but I've never seen him before. He's asking to come inside." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear muffled voices in the background. "His name's Mike?" the dad finally asked, his voice tight. "Yes," I said, my anxiety growing. "He says he's a friend of yours." There was another pause, and then the dad said something I will never forget. "Listen to me carefully. We don't know anyone named Mike. Don't open the door for him. Whatever you do, do not let him inside." I felt like I had been struck with a jolt of ice. My stomach twisted into knots. "What do I do?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice from cracking. "Lock the door, call the police, and stay inside with the kids. Do not let him in. Do you hear me?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. My hands were trembling as I gripped the phone. "I'm calling the police now. Don't open the door." "We'll be home soon," he said quickly, before hanging up. I stood there frozen for a few seconds, trying to make sense of everything. The man outside, the fact that the parents didn't know him, none of it made sense. My mind was racing, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I moved quickly, locking the door and turning off the porch light. I pulled the curtain shut as quietly as I could. I glanced toward the stairs, just to make sure the kids were still in bed, and then I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police if anything else happened. I crouched down behind the couch, clutching the phone in my hands, waiting for the next move. My ears strained to hear any sounds from outside. Everything was silent. Then I heard it. A knock. It was soft at first, almost polite. I didn't move. I stayed as still as possible. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a voice. "I know you're in there," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "Let me in. I'm just here to check on the kids." I squeezed my phone tighter. I could feel the sweat forming on the back of my neck. I wanted to scream, but I kept my mouth shut. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. I wasn't going to let him know how terrified I was. The knocking continued, louder and more insistent now. It went on for what felt like an eternity. I could hear him shifting his weight, moving around the porch, trying every window, every door. And then, silence. It was as if he had just vanished. There were no footsteps, no more knocking, no sounds of movement at all. I held my breath, not daring to make a sound. Minutes passed, and still nothing. I stayed in that position, frozen, not knowing what to do. Then, finally, I heard the sirens in the distance. I didn't even realize how much time had passed. The sound of the police arriving sent a wave of relief over me, but I didn't move from my spot. I waited for them to knock, waited for them to tell me it was safe to open the door. When I finally opened the door to let the officers in, they took my statement, checked around the house, and found no sign of the man. He had disappeared without a trace. I never found out who he was or what he wanted. I never found out if he'd been following me, or if he had been watching the house for days. All I know is that it felt like he knew I was alone, that he knew exactly when to show up. I haven't babysat since that night. I haven't been able to shake the feeling that someone's always watching me, just waiting for the right moment to knock. I never thought something like this could happen to me. It was just an ordinary drive, nothing unusual. But one moment changed everything, and it's something I'll never forget. It happened a few months ago. I was driving alone on a stretch of road I'd been on 1,000 times. It was a long, flat stretch between two small towns, with nothing around for miles. The weather was fine, a little windy, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. I was listening to music, enjoying the quiet, when out of nowhere, my car jerked to the side, and I heard this awful noise, like metal scraping against pavement. My heart jumped in my chest. I pulled the car over as quickly as I could, panicked but relieved that I was still on the road and not in a ditch. I knew what had happened almost immediately. The unmistakable sound of a blowout. The car was leaning to the side, and I could feel the flat tire dragging on the ground. My mind started racing. What now? I wasn't anywhere near a gas station or a town, and I didn't want to be stranded out here for too long. I knew I had a spare in the trunk, but the thought of trying to change a tire on my own in the middle of nowhere was daunting. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. I couldn't even make a call for help. That made the sinking feeling in my stomach worse. I sighed, debating whether I should start working on the tire myself or just wait it out. Before I could make up my mind, a truck pulled up behind me. The man driving slowed down, then stopped just a few feet behind my car. I wasn't exactly thrilled about a stranger pulling over, but he was the only person around. I watched as he climbed out of his truck. He wasn't young, maybe in his mid-40s, wearing a plaid shirt and a worn-out pair of jeans. He had this rough, weathered look about him, like he'd been on the road for a long time. He walked toward me with a smile. "Flat tire?" he asked, his voice rough but friendly. "Yeah," I said, trying to be polite but cautious. "It blew out a few minutes ago. I was about to see if I could change it." "I've got a jack and a spare in the back of my truck," he said, nodding toward his vehicle. "I can give you a hand. It's no trouble." I hesitated for a second. He seemed friendly enough, but I'd heard enough stories about people who offered help only to take advantage of others. But I was in the middle of nowhere, and I knew I couldn't do it alone without any tools. My car's manual jack was flimsy at best. "Are you sure?" "I've got the tools. I started, but he cut me off." "Don't worry about it. I've done this 100 times. Just let me help you out." I didn't want to seem rude, so I agreed. "Okay, thanks. I really appreciate it." He smiled wider, and it seemed genuine enough, so I walked toward his truck to see what he had in the back. That's when I started to feel uncomfortable. I don't know exactly what it was, but something about the way he was acting felt off. I was already standing beside my car, watching as he reached into the back of his truck, and I noticed that he wasn't looking at the tire or the tools. Instead, his eyes kept darting to me just for a second, but long enough for me to feel uneasy. "Here, I've got everything you need," he said, pulling out a heavy-duty jack and a toolbox. I took a step back, glancing at my own tire again. Something inside me was telling me to be cautious, but at the same time, I felt like I was just overthinking it. I wasn't going to get anywhere if I didn't let him help. "All right, let's get this done," I said, trying to sound confident, but still uneasy. He set the jack down, then looked up at me. "Actually," he said, his voice changing just slightly, "I'll just help you change it. You can wait in my truck. It'll be quicker that way." I froze. It wasn't what I had expected him to say. I stared at him, not sure how to respond. "I'll just be a few minutes," he added, his tone softer but somehow more insistent. "You can relax in my truck while I work. No reason for you to be out here, right?" I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, I'm fine. I can wait right here. I don't need to go in your truck." Something shifted in his face. His smile faded, and his eyes darkened just enough for me to notice. He took a step closer. I said, "Get in the truck," he repeated, more forcefully this time. His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a cold chill run through me. My heart started pounding. I'm fine, really," I stammered, my mind racing. "I can handle this. Please, just let me stay here." Without saying another word, he took a step back, pulled something from his pocket, and with a swift motion, slashed my other tire. I heard the air hiss out of the tire before I even fully processed what had happened. "What the hell?" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. "Why did you do that?" He just stood there, looking at me with that same cold expression. "Now you really need my help. The truck's right there. Get in, and I'll get you back on the road." My heart was racing now, and fear surged through me. This wasn't just some guy offering help, it was a threat. I could feel the adrenaline hit my bloodstream, and I knew that if I didn't act fast, things could go south very quickly. I backed away from him, heading toward my car. I grabbed the door handle, ready to get in, but I didn't want to turn my back on him. I needed to get away. I had no idea what he was capable of, but I wasn't about to find out. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm calling the police. You need to leave right now." He smirked but didn't move. "You really think they'll be here in time? This is a dead stretch of road, sweetheart. No one's going to hear you." I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my mind racing. I pulled out my phone, dialing 911 as fast as I could. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stay calm enough to speak. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man on the side of the road. He just slashed both of my tires, and I think he's trying to hurt me. Please, I need help, I said, my voice trembling. The dispatcher asked for details, and I gave them as quickly as I could. I kept my eyes on the man through the rearview mirror, watching him slowly walk back to his truck. I didn't move until I heard the sirens in the distance. When I finally saw the flashing lights, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The police arrived within minutes. They pulled up, and the man started walking toward his truck. But before he could make it, 2 officers were out of their cars, confronting him. The situation ended fast after that. They arrested him, and I gave my statement to the police. He had been following me for a while, watching me drive alone in the area. They said he had done similar things before but had never been caught. I left that night shaken, but I was lucky. I was scared, but I made it out. I still don't understand why he did it, or what his real intentions were, but I'm just glad I didn't get in that truck. I'll never drive alone on that stretch of road again. It all started when I decided to sell a few things I no longer needed. I was in the process of moving and thought it would be a good idea to get rid of some furniture and odds and ends. I wasn't expecting much trouble, just the usual routine: take a few photos, post the ad, and wait for someone to come pick it up. I had done it before with no issues. But this time, things were different. The couch had been in my living room for a few years, a comfortable old thing that I didn't have much use for anymore. So, I posted an ad on a local online marketplace. It wasn't fancy or anything, just a simple listing with some pictures and a description. I figured it would sell quickly, and I'd be able to move on. The first person to reach out was a guy named Jake. He seemed polite enough in the messages, asked about the condition of the couch, when he could come by to take a look, and all the usual stuff. I told him he could stop by that afternoon. When Jake arrived, he seemed like just another guy, nothing out of the ordinary. He had a beat-up sedan with a trunk full of things, clearly a person who moved around a lot, probably just looking for a decent deal. He came up to my porch and knocked, smiling like he was just trying to make small talk. "Hi, I'm Jake. I saw your ad online for the couch. Is it still available?" "Yeah, sure." "Come on in," I said, stepping aside to let him in. I showed him to the living room, where the couch was sitting. It was nothing special, a beige color with a few small stains, but it was comfortable. I was surprised someone wanted it, to be honest. He took a good look at it, sat on it, tested the cushions, all that. I stood off to the side, unsure of what to do with myself. I wasn't planning on staying in the room for long, just kind of letting him look it over while we made small talk. He kept asking questions about it, more than I thought he would, like how long have you had it, and has it always been this color? The questions felt a little strange, but I chalked it up to his just being thorough. After a few minutes, he stood up. "I think I'll pass. It's just not what I was looking for," he said. "Oh, okay. No problem," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. He thanked me for my time and said goodbye. I watched him leave through the window, and then I went back to my day. I didn't think much of it. People always come to see things and then back out. It was a bit odd that he didn't buy it after all the time he spent looking it over, but I figured that was just how these things went. Later that night, I sat down to have dinner, maybe unwind for a bit. It was around 9 or so when I heard a noise outside. It sounded like a car door slamming. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I heard footsteps on the gravel driveway. My first thought was that it was some late-night neighbor stopping by or maybe someone walking their dog. I turned off the lights and peeked through the blinds. At first, I couldn't see anyone, but then I saw movement, a shadow darting across the yard. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I watched for a few more moments, trying to figure out if I was just imagining things. I was about to pull away from the window when I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. There, standing under the streetlight, was Jake. He was holding something in his hand, something long and dark. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but then the moonlight hit it, and I saw the crowbar. I froze. My mind raced. Why was he back? What was he doing with that crowbar? I moved quickly, trying to be as quiet as possible. I grabbed my phone from the table and dialed 911, but as soon as I hit send, I froze. Jake was heading toward my porch, walking slowly and deliberately. He had his back to the street and wasn't looking around, just focused on my house. I didn't want him to see me moving around, so I dropped the phone on the couch and crouched low behind the coffee table, hoping he couldn't see me through the window. My heart was pounding. I couldn't breathe. I was still holding the breath, waiting to see what he'd do next. A few seconds later, I heard the unmistakable sound of something heavy tapping against my front door. I couldn't believe it. He was actually trying to get inside. I scrambled for my phone again, trying to call 911. My hands were shaking, but I managed to hit the number and press the phone to my ear. I whispered, "Please hurry, there's someone outside with a crowbar, and I think they're trying to break in." The dispatcher immediately asked for my address and assured me they were sending someone out right away. I stayed on the line with her, trying to stay calm. She told me to stay quiet and not to engage with the person outside. I just had to wait for help. Jake kept tapping at the door. I could hear him muttering to himself under his breath, but I couldn't make out the words. He sounded agitated, and every second felt like an eternity. The tapping on the door stopped, and for a moment, I thought maybe he was giving up, but then I heard the unmistakable sound of the crowbar scraping against the door frame. That's when I knew I couldn't just sit there anymore. I had to do something. I looked around for any kind of weapon or tool I could use, but all I had nearby was a heavy lamp on the coffee table. I grabbed it, holding it tight, just in case. The door rattled again. I could hear him now, breathing heavily, moving around the porch. He wasn't just trying to get in anymore. He was getting impatient, frustrated. I couldn't tell what he was going to do next. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. I held my breath, waiting, hoping that he had left. I stayed frozen for what felt like forever, just listening to the silence. Finally, I heard a faint sound, a car door opening and closing, and then the engine revved to life. Jake was gone. I stayed where I was, too scared to move, until I heard the distant sound of sirens. When the police arrived, they checked the area, but there was no sign of him. The crowbar was still lying on the porch, though. They took it as evidence, and I gave them a full statement. They said they would look into it and try to track him down, but I never saw him again. I moved shortly after that, not wanting to risk another encounter. I still think about that night, and every time I hear a car outside, I get a little nervous. I don't know what Jake wanted, but I know for sure I was lucky to get away. I had been looking forward to this trip for months. A solo getaway to decompress, clear my head, and get some writing done. I booked a modest hotel in a quiet city where I wouldn't know anyone, deliberately choosing some place that didn't feel too touristy. The hotel itself wasn't fancy, but it had good reviews online and seemed clean and safe, exactly what I needed. The first night was uneventful. I had dinner at a small cafe nearby, came back to the room, and spent a couple of hours watching TV before heading to bed. The room was on the 4th floor, tucked at the end of a long hallway. It was quiet, with the faint hum of the HVAC system filling the silence. I liked the solitude. The second night, however, was when things got strange. It was around 10 p.m. I'd spent most of the day walking around the city and was feeling tired but satisfied. After a long shower, I changed into pajamas and settled into bed with my laptop, trying to work on a short story I'd been meaning to finish. I'd barely typed a paragraph when I heard a soft knock at the door. It startled me. I hadn't ordered room service or requested anything from the front desk. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it, but then it came again, louder this time. "Housekeeping," a woman's voice called out. I frowned. It didn't make sense for housekeeping to come by this late. Normally, they clean the rooms during the day, and if you need something after hours, you call the front desk. My mind immediately went to all the stories I'd read online about scams and hotel thefts. But I told myself I was probably overreacting. Maybe they were short-staffed or had a new hire who didn't know the schedule. Still, something didn't feel right. I got out of bed and approached the door cautiously. The peephole was foggy, maybe scratched from years of use, so I couldn't see much beyond a vague silhouette. The voice called out again, "Housekeeping." "Just checking in." That didn't make sense. Why would housekeeping need to check in at 10 p.m.? I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lock. "What do you need?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. "Towels," she said finally. "I have fresh towels." "I didn't ask for any," I replied. Another pause. "Then, it's complimentary." I stepped back from the door, my heart starting to race. Something about her tone felt off. It was too rehearsed, like she wasn't used to saying it but thought it sounded convincing. My instinct screamed at me not to open the door. "No, thank you," I said firmly. "I'm fine." For a moment, there was silence. Then, I heard the faintest sound, like someone brushing against the door or leaning against it. My skin prickled. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated down the hallway. I waited until I couldn't hear them anymore before I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I double-checked the lock and slid the metal latch across for good measure. Then I sat back on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Maybe it was nothing, just a confused employee or a harmless mistake. But the feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. The rest of the night, I couldn't relax. Every little sound from the hallway made me tense up, imagining the worst. I eventually fell asleep with the lights and the TV on, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The next morning, I went down to the front desk. The woman behind the counter greeted me with a cheerful smile. I hesitated for a moment, not wanting to sound paranoid, but I finally asked, "Does housekeeping normally do rounds late at night?" "Around 10 p.m.? Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion. "No, not at all," she said. "Housekeeping finishes their shifts by 6 p.m. Was someone bothering you?" I told her what happened, trying to keep my voice calm. Her expression grew more concerned as I spoke. She assured me that no staff had been scheduled for my floor at that time and promised to look into it. I nodded, but the uneasy feeling in my stomach didn't go away. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the incident. I avoided the hotel as much as possible, spending hours in coffee shops and public parks, surrounded by other people. When I finally returned that evening, I asked for a different room, preferably on a higher floor. The staff accommodated my request without question, and I felt a small sense of relief. But that night, as I lay in bed in my new room, I couldn't stop thinking about the voice at the door. The pauses in her answers. The way she'd lingered, as if waiting for me to open up. I wondered what would have happened if I had. Would she have come in alone? Or was someone else waiting around the corner, out of sight? I don't know who or what was behind that door. Maybe it really was just a harmless misunderstanding. Or maybe it wasn't. All I know is that I've learned to trust my instincts, even when the logical part of my brain tells me I'm being silly. Sometimes, that gut feeling is all you have to keep you safe. We had been looking for a tutor for our son, Liam, for a while. He's always been a bright kid, but lately, his grades were slipping, especially in math. We both work full-time, and we thought hiring a tutor would give him the extra help he needed to catch up. We found someone through an online service, a woman named Claire. She had excellent reviews, and her background was impressive. She'd been a teacher for over 10 years and had worked with kids of all ages. She seemed like the perfect fit. The first few sessions went smoothly. Claire was professional, friendly, and very patient with Liam. She came to our house twice a week, and every time, she was on time, well prepared, and stayed the full hour. Liam seemed to be enjoying it, too. He'd talk about the lessons afterward, and we noticed that his attitude toward homework was improving. But then, little things started to change. At first, it wasn't anything that stood out too much. She'd ask questions that were slightly off, but we didn't think much of it. "What time do you guys usually get home from work?" she asked one day as we were wrapping up a lesson. I answered, telling her that my wife and I typically get in around 6:30 p.m. It seemed like a harmless question at the time. But then, over the next couple of weeks, she asked about our routines more and more. "Do you go out often on weekends? How long do you usually spend doing groceries?" It started to feel a little invasive, but I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just trying to build rapport with Liam, trying to understand his home life better so she could connect with him more. But as time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then came the first instance of something disappearing. One morning, I went to get my car keys from the kitchen counter, and they were gone. I asked my wife if she had moved them. She said she hadn't. I searched the house, thinking I had misplaced them, but I couldn't find them anywhere. I figured I must have been more tired than I thought, so I let it go. A few days later, it happened again. This time, it was a pair of earrings my wife had left on the bathroom counter. She couldn't find them. She swore she hadn't touched them, and I was starting to feel unsettled. The feeling of something being off in the house, something I couldn't put my finger on, was growing. Then there were the other things. Small things, like my watch going missing or the TV remote vanishing for a day or two. Sometimes, we find things in odd places, like a book that was left on the shelf suddenly turned up on the kitchen table. I didn't say anything to my wife at first, but she noticed too. But it was the day Liam came to me with something that really made my heart race. He was looking through his backpack when he found something strange, a small notebook. It wasn't his, and it wasn't anything we bought. It had a few pages torn out, and some scribbled notes inside. But what caught my attention was the handwriting. It was Claire's. She had written about Liam's progress in the tutoring sessions, yes, but she'd also written down personal details about me and my wife, even about the house. "They usually leave at 8 a.m., one note said. "Their car is always in the driveway by 6:30 p.m. There were other things too, details that she couldn't have known unless she had been paying close attention, things that went beyond the tutoring sessions. That was when I started connecting the dots. The weird questions, the missing things, the notebook, everything pointed to Claire. She was more than just a tutor. She was watching us. She was taking notes on our lives. We decided to install a security camera in the living room. It wasn't anything too obvious, just a small, hidden camera that would blend in with the decor. I felt like we had no choice. We needed proof. The next time Claire came for a lesson, we pretended everything was normal. I acted like nothing was wrong, but my mind was racing. When I reviewed the footage that night, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Claire had come in, and after a few minutes of tutoring, she started looking around the room. She wasn't paying attention to Liam anymore. She was glancing at the shelves, the counters, the little knickknacks my wife and I had collected over the years. She was even taking mental notes about the places she visited in the house. It was like she was mapping it all out. Then, as she got up to help Liam with something, I saw her glance at the counter where we kept our spare keys. She moved toward it, hesitated, then reached for them. She picked them up, looked at them for a moment, and put them in her bag. That was the moment I knew we had to confront her. We couldn't let it go any longer. I called my wife, and we talked it over. We agreed that we would cancel the next lesson. I'd be home, and I'd confront Claire directly. We didn't want to make it a scene, but we needed to know what was going on. The next day, I texted her and told her we were no longer in need of her services. She responded quickly, thanking us for the opportunity and asking if she could return to pick up her materials. I didn't respond right away, but I was on edge. That night, when Claire arrived to pick up her things, she acted completely normal. She smiled, asked how we were doing, and made small talk. She didn't act like she'd done anything wrong. But when I asked her if she had taken anything from our house, her face went pale. She stammered a little, then said, "What do you mean?" I didn't give her a chance to explain. I asked her directly about the notebook, about the keys, and the missing items. At first, she denied it. But when I told her I had seen the footage, her demeanor changed completely. She became defensive, insisting she had only been looking around because she was curious. She apologized, but there was something in her eyes, something cold, that made me feel uneasy. I told her to leave, and she did. The next day, we called the police. They took the notebook, the camera footage, and statements from us. They told us they'd look into it, but we haven't heard from them since. I don't know if she had any intention of stealing from us or if she was just obsessed with our lives, but I'm glad we found out before things got worse. We've changed the locks and added extra security to the house. Liam's doing better in school, but I'm still not completely comfortable. I'm constantly checking everything now, wondering if we missed anything else. What if there's more we don't know? The worst part is that I don't know why she did it. What was she trying to get from us? What was her end game? The uncertainty is the hardest part to deal with. We hired a tutor for our son a few months ago. He's 9, and while he's smart, he was falling behind in math and reading. My wife and I both work full-time, so we decided having someone come to the house would be easier than shuttling him back and forth to a learning center. We found Mark through an online service. His profile was impressive: years of experience, glowing reviews, even a background in child psychology. He seemed perfect. Mark came to meet us before his first session, and everything felt right. He was friendly, professional, and great with our son, Ethan. He stayed about an hour, discussing his approach and going over Ethan's needs. We felt confident leaving him with Ethan for the first session later that week. The lesson started off well. Ethan seemed to enjoy working with Mark, which was a relief. He even started bringing his math homework to the dinner table to show us what he'd learned. We were thrilled and thought we'd found the perfect fit. It wasn't until a few weeks in that things started to feel off. At first, it was subtle. Mark would ask questions that didn't seem related to tutoring. "Do you and your wife both work late?" he asked one evening as I walked him to the door. I thought he was just making conversation, so I answered without much thought. Then, during another session, he casually asked if we had any travel plans coming up. Again, I didn't think much of it. People ask those kinds of questions all the time. But then he started asking Ethan similar things. "What time does your mom usually get home? Do you ever stay home by yourself?" Ethan mentioned it to us one night, laughing because he thought the questions were weird. My wife and I exchanged a look but decided not to jump to conclusions. Maybe Mark was just trying to connect with Ethan, we thought. Then small items began to go missing. It was little things at first: loose change from the counter, a pack of gum, a cheap pen set my wife kept near the phone. We joked about it, blaming each other or Ethan. "Stop stealing my pens," my wife said, laughing. Ethan swore he hadn't touched them, and I believed him. But then the missing items started to add up. A set of spare keys we kept in the kitchen drawer vanished. A pair of earrings my wife left on the bathroom sink disappeared. Even one of my watches, a cheap one I wore for work, was gone. We turned the house upside down looking for these things but found nothing. It wasn't until my wife noticed her jewelry box slightly out of place on her dresser that we started to piece things together. The box wasn't where she usually left it, and when she opened it, she swore a necklace was missing. "I think Mark might be stealing from us," she said one night after Ethan had gone to bed. I wanted to dismiss it, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. He was the only person who'd been in the house regularly besides us. But why? He didn't seem like the type. He was polite, punctual, and great with Ethan. What motive could he possibly have? We decided to test our theory. The next time Mark came over, we left a few $20 bills on the kitchen counter, partially hidden under some mail. We made sure to step out of the room a couple of times during the session, giving him the opportunity to take them. After he left, we checked. The money was gone. My stomach dropped. My wife was livid. We wanted to confront him right away, but we were also nervous about making accusations without solid proof. What if we were wrong? What if Ethan got caught in the middle of something ugly? We decided to install a small camera in the living room where most of the tutoring sessions took place. It was discreet, hidden among some books on the shelf. We figured if he was taking anything, we'd catch him in the act. The next session, we acted like everything was normal. Mark came in, greeted Ethan, and started the lesson while we pretended to work in the other room. After he left, we immediately checked the footage. What we saw made my blood run cold. Mark wasn't just tutoring. While Ethan was focused on his workbook, Mark kept glancing around the room, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. At one point, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook. He started writing in it, looking up occasionally at Ethan and around the room. When Ethan got up to use the bathroom, Mark stood and started walking around the living room. He opened a cabinet, rifled through some papers, and even peeked into a box we kept on the shelf. He didn't take anything this time, at least not that we could see, but the intent was clear. He was snooping. We were furious but also scared. What was he looking for? Was he planning to steal more? Or worse? We decided to call the police. They advised us to cancel the next session and avoid confrontation. They'd come to the house to take a report and review the footage. When we told Mark we wouldn't need his services anymore, his reaction chilled me. He didn't argue or ask why. He just smiled and said, "I understand." If you ever change your mind, feel free to reach out. The police came the next day and took our statement. They said they'd look into Mark's background and see if he'd been reported for similar behavior. In the meantime, we changed our locks and added security cameras around the house. We also warned Ethan never to open the door to anyone he didn't know, even if they claimed to be a friend. A few days later, the police called with an update. Mark had a record, nothing major, just a few misdemeanors for theft and trespassing. But it was enough to confirm our suspicions. They said they tried to locate him for questioning but didn't think we were in immediate danger. Still, I can't shake the feeling that we dodged a bullet. Every time I hear a car pull into the driveway or see someone walking past the house, my heart races. I can't help but wonder what might have happened if we hadn't noticed the signs. We're more careful now, especially about who we let into our home. Ethan's doing fine, he's caught up in school and doesn't seem too bothered by what happened. But my wife and I can't stop thinking about how close we came to letting a stranger into our lives who clearly had his own agenda. We never heard from Mark again, and honestly, I hope we never do. I never thought much about picking up hitchhikers, but it was late, and the rain had started coming down hard. I was driving back from a business trip, and I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. The roads were quiet, and I could barely see more than a few feet in front of me because of the rain. Then, on the side of the road, I saw him just standing there, drenched, thumb out, staring into the headlights. I debated for a second. Normally, I wouldn't stop, but something made me pull over. Maybe it was the way he looked. He seemed harmless, just a guy in his mid-30s, with a rain-soaked jacket and a tired face. I rolled down the window a bit. "You need a ride?" I asked. He nodded quickly, stepping toward the car. "Yeah, please. I've been waiting for a while." I unlocked the door, and he slid in. He thanked me as he shut the door, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Just past Clearwater," he said, looking out the window. "I'll get off soon. Just need to get out of the rain." "Clearwater?" "That's a couple hours away," I said, but I didn't mind. It was getting late, and I'd rather have some company on the road than not. We were the only two cars on the highway, and the rain wasn't showing any sign of stopping. "Yeah," he said, looking back at me. "I've got a friend out there. He's expecting me." His voice was calm, maybe a bit too calm for someone who had just been standing out in the pouring rain for who knows how long. I nodded and kept driving. For the next 20 minutes, there was silence between us. It wasn't uncomfortable, but there was something strange about him. He didn't seem to mind the quiet, and every so often, I'd catch him looking at me, like he was studying me. "You from around here?" he asked after a while. "No, just passing through," I replied. "Work trip?" He nodded slowly, his eyes drifting back to the window. "Yeah, me too. Just passing through. Gotta get somewhere important." I didn't know why, but something about that made me uneasy. It was like the way he said it, like he was hiding something. I kept my focus on the road, trying not to let my mind wander. After about another 10 minutes, I heard him shift in his seat. I glanced over and saw him looking at me, but his expression was different now. Harder. It wasn't that friendly face anymore. His eyes were cold. "You know," he said, his voice low, "you didn't really have to stop, you know. You didn't have to pick me up." I felt a little chill run down my spine, but I tried to stay calm. "You looked like you needed help," I said, glancing at him for a second before focusing back on the road. "I don't need anyone's help," he said, and now there was a sharpness to his voice. It wasn't the same person who had gotten into the car a while ago. I just needed a ride, and now I'm stuck with you. I didn't know what to say. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe he was just a little too tired or maybe he'd had a rough day. "It's all right," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Just trying to be friendly. He didn't respond. The air in the car had shifted. It wasn't the rain anymore, but something about the way he was sitting in his seat, his eyes locked on me, made the car feel smaller. He was still staring at me, unblinking. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "You should probably get out when we hit the next exit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't move. Didn't say a word for a long time. I glanced at him, just as the headlights cut through the rain. "Hey," I said. Before I could finish, he suddenly reached forward, grabbing the door handle like he was about to throw it open. I swerved to the side, almost hitting the guardrail. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to regain control of the car. "Stop!" I yelled, my voice shaking now. He let go of the handle, but he was still staring at me, his face twisted into something I couldn't quite read. "You think I'm just gonna let you tell me what to do? You think I'm just gonna get out when you say so?" The rain was pounding harder now, and the headlights barely cut through it. I tried to focus on the road, my hands slipping on the wheel. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I said, my voice shaky. "You're not as nice as you think," he muttered. "You picked me up, so you deal with me now." I was starting to panic, but I tried not to show it. I didn't want to make him angrier. "I'll pull over at the next exit," I said. "You can get out there." He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his seat and chuckled. It wasn't a laugh, it was a low, eerie sound, like he was mocking me. "You think I'm gonna get out? After all this?" I looked at him again, this time fully aware of the danger. He wasn't planning on leaving. I knew it then, but I wasn't sure what to do. "You need to get out," I said again, my voice firm, but my heart was racing. But now he just grinned. It was a slow, deliberate smile, and something in it made me want to vomit. "You don't get it, do you?" "I'm not getting out," he said. I was trembling now, but I wasn't about to let him have control. I quickly reached for my phone, planning to call for help, but before I could do anything, he reached across the seat and grabbed my wrist. His fingers were like iron, digging into my skin. "You can't just call someone," he hissed. I yanked my wrist away, my mind racing. I had to think fast. I couldn't let him control this situation. I focused on the road, trying to remain calm, even though panic was rising inside me. I remembered the gun I kept in the glove box. I had never used it, but I had it there for situations like this. He must have seen the shift in my expression because he leaned forward, his face inches from mine. "You think that'll help?" he whispered, his breath hot and rank in my face. But before I could react, I saw the lights of another car in the distance. Relief flooded me, and for a split second, I thought I might get out of this alive. The car was close, and I steered toward it. My foot slammed on the gas, and I cut across 2 lanes to get behind the other vehicle. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the hitchhiker still watching me, his eyes burning into the back of my skull. I wasn't safe yet, but I was getting closer. I couldn't go back to the road we'd been on, but I could keep driving. I had to keep driving, away from him, away from whatever the hell he had planned. When I finally found a gas station and stopped, I jumped out of the car, locked the doors, and ran inside. I didn't stop until I was inside, safe. The stranger never followed me inside, but I swear I saw him standing outside in the rain, watching me through the window.